Check, check, check. Check, check, check. All right. So, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is October 7th, 2024. And yeah, it's about 12:24 a.m. So, for anybody who is celebrating the holiday for something that is very obvious, shout out to all of you out there. And yeah, may the fight for liberation and the national struggle continue for freedom for all people, right? Anyway, I haven't done a live stream in about a week because I've been hella busy, right? And the purpose of my book react series, which is what you're watching now, is to inspire people and tell people that we shouldn't have any excuse to say like why we can't read, why we don't have time to read, why we do not have the opportunity to pick up a book, right? Because a lot of people work, a lot of people are studying, a lot of people have family issues that they have going on, so they don't have time to read, right? And that's why I come on these live streams and read these books with y'all, right? And I don't want to come across as a hypocrite to make it seem like, oh, I'm impervious to those forces as well, as if I always make it a point, right? I have lazy days too. I have times when I'm preoccupied. I have times when I'm too tied up and busy to actually jump into what needs to be done, which is education and educating myself, right? So that's why we're continuing this book series. We're not going to give up on this book. It's a kind of a big, thick book. I think pages were about in chapter 6, page 115. So we're going to continue right here. All right. So Tommy Temper says, I'm pretty sure I do my education on the internet these days. Me too. I watch a lot of educational content on YouTube. When I was a kid, I was that kid watching the Discovery Channel and TLC before they had, nothing but reality shows, right? It's very important to educate yourself, right? I don't know if kids today have those same sort of channels on TV, but YouTube is a platform where you can educate yourself or entertain yourself or do both, right? Which is what I do. I listen to a lot of music on YouTube and watch a lot of documentaries and stuff like that as well, and also listen to a lot of professors talk. So hopefully when I become a professor, y'all will still be sticking around listening to me. Shout out to Tommy Temper and everybody else like him who likes to be educated on YouTube and likes to discuss serious topics, right? But also have fun with it too. So for our fifth book in our book react series, we're reading Kamala Harris's book, The Truths We Hold. This is her memoir talking about her life and her career in politics and her vision for America, right? And even though I've already said who I'm voting for, so go watch the video I made where I talked about voting. I already got my ballot right here to send off to my state of Louisiana, and you can see and know who I'm voting for and who I endorse for president, right? I still think it's important for us to get to know the person who will most likely be the 46th president of the United States. I believe we're at 46 now. Anyway, so yeah, this is Kamala Harris's book, published in 2019. You can pick it up on Amazon for the humble price of only $31 in hardcover, $11 in paperback, and $9 on Kindle. But if you want the hookup on free books, holla at your boy. I know the place. Anyway, like I said, we're picking up in the middle of chapter 6. I'm only going to be on live stream for maybe an hour and some change. And yeah, we're going to try to finish chapter 6 and 7 today. And once again, guys, I know I try to make promises that I'll come live every day and also do other topics as well. But yeah, hella busy, got a lot of schoolwork, got a lot of assignments, got a lot of private English classes that I do. So always caught up in something, but let's get into it. So there's a region in Central America known as the Northern Triangle, which includes 3 countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Together, these countries have the menacing distinction of being among the most violent in the world. Between 1979 and 1992, El Salvador was undone by civil war that left as many as 75,000 dead. Between 1960 and 1996, Guatemala's civil war resulted in the deaths of 200,000 civilians. Honduras didn't have a civil war, but the violence in neighboring countries bled across its borders and made it to one of the world's most dangerous places to live. Even after the wars ended, the violence did it. A broken economy with deep poverty and few jobs, awash in weapons and generational destruction led to the formation of organized criminal organizations that use murder, rape, and other sexual violence to control territory and take over large swaths of the region. In the years since, more people have been killed and kidnapped in the Northern Triangle than in some of the world's most brutal wars. Between 2011 and 2014, nearly 50,000 people were murdered in the Northern Triangle, and just 5% of the deaths resulted in judicial convictions. I don't know if she's going to say this, though I highly doubt it. It's very important to put in context why those countries in the Northern Triangle are so violent. It's because during the Cold War, America was toppling democratically elected leaders. Any elected official that came into office saying that we need to nationalize the land or give wealth back to the people and not have these stratified societies with a white ruling elite class on top, those people got killed, deposed, thrown in jail, and the US government was supporting uh, uh, Contra revolutionary forces. Literally, the Contras in Nicaragua were backed up by the US government to destabilize that country because they had communists and socialists leading the nation. Very important to put that into context, though I doubt that will be mentioned here. So, for residents of these countries, life is often defined by terror. Gang violence, drug trafficking, and corruption are rampant. The largest and most notorious of these transnational criminal organizations, MS-13 and the Mara-18, are reported to include as many as 85,000 members worldwide. They extort small business owners and residents in poor neighborhoods into paying hundreds of millions of dollars each and every year. Those who don't pay risk death for them and their families. The gangs recruit young men to join their ranks through sexual threats. Sorry, through threats and intimidation, sexual threats. That'd be hilarious. Hey, join our gang and we're going to put something in your butt. I doubt that happens. But anyway, they force teenage girls to endure sexual violence as so-called gang girlfriends. Indeed, for women and girls in these countries, violence, the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence women reported that violent deaths of women in Honduras had risen by 263.4% between 2005 and 2013. There are stories of children being robbed, raped, murdered, including an 11-year-old girl in Honduras whose killers slashed her throat and stuffed her underwear in it. If there was a ground zero for brutality and bleakness, the Northern Triangle would. Thousands of people have fled the region into neighboring countries and through Mexico to the United States. In the past, we have welcomed asylum seekers in accordance with international law, granting them special protected status because of the severity of the hardships they face. Sometimes they come as families, but all too often the journey is impossible to afford, leaving parents with an excruciating choice. Do they keep their children close, but in the midst of mortal peril, or do they send them to the United States, knowing that if they survive the perilous journey, they will have a chance to be safe and free? In the summer of 2014, an unprecedented surge of tens of thousands of children and adolescents fled the violence of the Northern Triangle through human smuggling networks that brought them to the United States. I was Attorney General at the time, sitting at home watching the evening news when I in Marietta, California, a town roughly halfway between Angeles and San Diego, several buses carrying roughly 140 undocumented children and parents were on their way to a processing center. A crowd had gathered, blocking the street, waving flags and signs yelling, "Nobody wants you. You're not welcome. Turn around and go back home." There were children inside the buses looking out of their windows at faces filled with hate and vitriol. Their only wrong was that they had fled horrific violence on the street. At the same time, a big push was coming out of DC to expedite the decision-making process so that they could quickly turn undocumented kids and families back. The aim was to assess and reach asylum decisions in about 2 weeks. Now, to be clear, the process requires someone to make a decision about whether the asylum seeker was fleeing real harm. That means that children have to share facts and tell their story in a comprehensive way. I knew, having prosecuted child sexual assault, that it takes a long time to earn a child's trust and for a child to be able to tell his or her story in a court of law. What was worse, I learned that these asylum-seeking kids had no right to a lawyer to guide them through the process, and that mattered a great deal. If you don't have a lawyer, there's about 90% chance that you will lose your asylum case. If you have legal advice, there's about a 50% chance you will prevail. Given what deportation would take these children back into the heart of danger, whether or not they had a lawyer was a matter of life and death. I had to do something about this, and I knew there wasn't any time to waste. So I personally got on the phone with managing partners of some of the most prestigious law firms in California, as well as corporate lawyers from big entertainment companies like Walt Disney and Warner Brothers. Asked them to come to my office to help me make sure these children, some as young as 8 years old, had lawyers and thus had to access to due process. Representatives of law firms convened in the conference rooms of my downtown Los Angeles office, and I took on the role of auctioneer. Okay, can I get 500 hours of pro bono from on you. What about your firm? What can you guys do for us? Soon after, we held a similar meeting in Northern California where I did the same. We rallied the private lawyers to work through one of the community agencies that was offering legal services to help unaccompanied kids. Then I sponsored legislation to provide $3 million to other nonprofits that were providing these children with legal representation. This was my first experience with the crisis in the Northern Triangle and the consequences it had wrought on children and families, but it wouldn't be the last. In January 2017, one of the new administration's first orders of business was signing an executive order that revoked the temporary protected status of immigrants from the Northern Triangle. As a result, some 350,000 immigrants are in the process of losing their right to live and work in the United States. The administration also ordered a change in the asylum cases in the way asylum cases are considered, making it more difficult for immigrants to establish a legal basis for staying in the United States. Between February and June 2017, the number of applicants found to be eligible for asylum dropped by 10%. In March 2017, Secretary Kelly went on CNN where he was asked about a report that in order to deter more people from the Northern Triangle from coming to the United States, he was actively considering the possibility of forcibly separating parents from their children at the border. I would do almost anything to deter the people from Central America from getting on this very, very dangerous network that brings them up through Mexico into the United States, he said, confirming that it was under consideration. Shortly thereafter, Elaine Duke, the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, appeared before the Homeland Security Committee. Do you know when this is supposed to take effect? I asked her, trying to gauge the likelihood that something so atrocious could be underway. It is not a decision, she said. The secretary, I talked to him personally about it. He considers it still a possibility. They are looking at a wide range of deterrence, and it was raised as a possible method of deterrence, but there is no decision made and there is no implementation plan currently. It was an unacceptable answer. The next month, when Kelly appeared before the committee, I grilled him on the issue. He was evasive about whether this policy was under consideration, but he refused to rule it out. So are you unwilling, sir, to issue a written directive that it is the policy of this department to not separate children from their mothers unless the life of the child is in danger? I don't need to do that. I continued to press for answers through the end of 2017 and into 2018, but DHS was not forthcoming. Then on April 6, 2018, Attorney General Sessions announced a zero-tolerance policy at the border, meaning that the administration would refer for criminal prosecution any adult crossing the border illegally, regardless of the reason. This could include separating children from their parents. We learned through a New York Times report several days later, we learned through a New York Times report several days later that despite DHS's insistence that there was no separation policy, 700 children have been separated from their parents since the previous October, including 100 who were under the age of 4. There are few things more cruel, more inhumane, more fundamentally evil than ripping a child from her parents' arms. We should all know this to be true on a gut level, but if we needed more proof, we could look at a statement released by Dr. Colleen Kraft, president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, on behalf of the organization, stating that she was appalled by the new policy. Dr. Kraft wrote about the extraordinary stress and trauma of family separation, which can cause irreparable harm, disrupting a child's brain architecture, affecting his or her short and long-term health. These findings are shared by the American Medical Association, which has called for an end to the policy, noting that the children the U.S. government is forcibly separating from their parents may be scarred for life. The administration claimed that it wouldn't separate families seeking asylum if they arrived at an official port of entry, as opposed to other parts of the border. But that didn't hold true. There were reports of a 6-year-old girl from the Democratic Republic of Congo who was taken from her mother when they arrived at the San Diego port of entry seeking asylum, even though the mother was able to establish a credible fear of persecution. This was just one of many documented cases of family separation at ports of entry. A blind 6-year-old was an 18-month-old. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a violation of international law. It was a human rights abuse. And the toll it took was not just on the children. After a man from Honduras was separated from his wife, after his 3-year-old son was ripped from his arms, after he was placed in an isolation cell, the trauma led him to take his own life. On May 15th, Kirstjen Nielsen, who had been confirmed as Homeland Security Secretary after Kelly was named White House Chief of Staff, came before our committee. I told her that I was extremely concerned about the administration's repeated attacks on some of the most vulnerable communities, children and pregnant women in particular, as enforced by DHS. I pointed to the DACA program, to the separation of children at the border, and to an agency directive that allows for more detentions of pregnant women. I expressed a concern about a new information sharing system between the Office of Refugee Resettlement and ICE that is likely to have a chilling effect on sponsors who otherwise would be willing to come forward to provide care for unaccompanied minors because of fear that doing so would lead to their own deportation. I also noted that the previous week, the Washington Post had reported that Nielsen was considering undermining an agreement that ensures standards of care for immigrant children, such as the provision of meals and recreation, and calls for them to be placed in the least restrictive setting possible. I told her that the administration had routinely provided misleading information to the committee and had even gone so far as to claim that policies many consider to be cruel, such as routinely separating families, are carried out in the best interest of the children. So my question to you is, last Thursday, the New York Times reported that the president has directed you to separate parents from children when they cross into the United States as a way to deter illegal immigrants. Is that correct? Have you been directed to separate parents from children as a method of deterrence of undocumented immigration? I have not been directed to do that for purposes of deterrence. No. What purpose have you been given for separating parents from their children? So my decision has been that anyone who breaks the law will be prosecuted. If you're a parent, or you're a single person, or you happen to have a family, if you cross between the ports of entry, we will refer you for prosecution. You have broken U.S. law. Again, I pressed. So your agency will be separate from their parents. No, what we'll be doing is prosecuting parents who have broken law, just as you do every day in the United States of America. But if that parent has a 4-year-old child, what do you plan on doing with that child? The child under law goes to HHS for care and custody. They will be separated from their parent. And so my question, just like we do in the United States every day, so they will be separated from their parent. And my question then is, when you are separating children from their parents, do you have a protocol in place about how that should be done? And are you training the people who will actually remove a child from their parent on how to do that in the least traumatic way? I would hope you do train on how to do that. And so the question is, and the request has been to give us the information about how you are training and what the protocols are for separating a child from their parent. I'm happy to provide you with the training information, she said, though she never did. Once again, Nielsen made the false claim that she had stuck with through the entire process. Again, we do not have a policy to separate children from their parents, she said. Our policy is if you break the law, we will prosecute you. You have an option to go to a port of entry and not illegally cross into our country. Let's call this what it is. The White House and DHS were using children, babies, as pawns in a profoundly misguided and inhumane policy to deter immigration. Attorney General Sessions admitted as much. Proudly, it appeared, while quoting scripture to justify the abuse. Persons who violate the law of our nation are subject to prosecution. I would cite you to the Apostle Paul in his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained them for purpose and order, he said, seemingly forgetting or omitting all of the teachings of Christ in the process. Going to my guy, Nelson Moreno, he says, I'm sorry, but I only care about black children. That's crazy. That's funny. That's funny as hell. Hey, there's some black people that are crossing the border too illegally. And while you might not like illegal crossings, I think we can all agree that, you know, children shouldn't be separated from their parents, right? You can make the argument, well, if I, break a crime as a citizen in America and I go to jail, technically I'm separated from my parents. Yeah, but what they were doing is literally taking these kids, sending them to a whole other agency, and then it's hard as hell for the parents to get reunited with their child. Right? So going on, continuing here. So let's call this what it is. The White House and the DHS were using children, babies, as pawns in a profoundly misguided and inhumane policy to deter immigration. Attorney General Sessions admitted as much proudly, it appeared, while quoting scripture to justify the abuse. Persons who violate the law of our nation are subject to prosecution. I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained them for purpose and order, he said, seemingly forgetting or omitting all of the teachings of Christ in the process. For an added dose of cruelty, Sessions got rid of the rights of women and children to seek asylum because of domestic abuse. I often describe the balance of our democracy as resting on four legs: three independent, co-equal branches of government, and a free, independent press. As this horror unfolded, the press worked tirelessly to safeguard our true values. Crews of reporters went down to our southern border, filming, filing, and reporting in real time, showing Americans what was really going on, bringing the crisis into our living rooms. The vivid daily coverage informed and inspired a public outcry that eventually forced the administration to backtrack, at least temporarily. On June 20th, 2018, the president signed an executive order that ended his family separation practice, but that did not put an end to the story. Rather than separating families, the new administration policy was to hold those families indefinitely behind bars. As of this writing, jailing innocent children remains the policy of the United States. Children remain separated from their parents, and in the aftermath of the executive order, we were still greeted with headlines like this one from the Texas Tribune: immigrant toddlers ordered to appear in court alone. On a hot, dry day at the end of June, I visited the Otay Mesa Detention Center, not far from the border between California and Mexico. I've seen many prisons. Otay Mesa was identical in appearance. To get in the facility, which is surrounded by chain link fences and barbed wire, you have to pass through multiple checkpoints. One gate opens, you stand in the middle area, and then it shuts behind you before another opens ahead. For anyone detained there, it sends a strong signal that you are locked away from the world. Going to the comments here, Nelson says 60% of those kids will be 4chan users or fascist voters. We need to drive mankind towards the golden path. I kind of agree with that, because this is the thing. A lot of people believe that the Democrats want to open the borders because they want illegal immigration from non-white countries, right? Because those are the voters who will back up the Democrats, right? But what we're seeing in America, right, and I've covered this on my channel, a lot of Hispanics, the second generation, are identifying as white. When non-black people move to America, a lot of them start to inculcate within themselves, in their families and in their own mind, right, a lot of the values of the dominant society. You'll have Hispanics who are identified and classified as white, vote Republican, and then say we need to close the border. Enrique Tarrio, one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, dark-skinned Hispanic man, was saying that, Western chauvinism is the way. We need to close the border, get rid of the illegals, the migrants, and all that sort of stuff. So, it's sort of crazy to think that the Democrats want to open the border to back up, their agenda or their party, right? Well, we know why the border is open. We know that it's corporations that want cheap labor. It's corporations that want cheap labor and people that will continually be the resource pool for workers, right? So that they can continue to depress wages and have the working class fight amongst ourselves. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. Going here to the comments. Nelson Moreno says they can learn to read by reading the code of law. Okay, Nelson's just trolling, right? But yeah, I think the law should be, this is what the law should be for immigration. You cannot immigrate to America illegally if we as Americans did not kill your president. Anybody who comes from a country where we killed your president, toppled your democratically elected president, destabilized your nation, you cannot just walk up in. So no Denmark, no, Sweden, no Norway, no Belgium, whatever, right? But if you come from Nicaragua, if you come from Chile, if you come from, any of the nations in Latin America who basically we treated you like our bitches in the 19th and 20th century, or the 21st century, right? Because we helped kill the president of Haiti too. Like, you cannot just walk into America. If Americans killed your president, you can just walk on in. And we're going to have a handwritten note from the president at the time saying, we're sorry, okay? All right. Nelson Moreno says ABC, don't cross the border without legal documents. Okay, the legal document is my passport from Honduras or Nicaragua, whatever, saying I am a citizen of a country that was destroyed by American imperialism. That's what they should do. That's what they should do. That should be the legal document. That's your visa. That's your visa. Continuing here. So once inside the building, I met with mothers who'd been separated from their children. They were wearing blue jumpsuits with the word detainee in black letters on their backs. I asked the facility staff to give us some privacy. They stood about 20 yards away while I asked the mothers about their experiences and came to understand the deep trauma they had endured. Olga told me that she hadn't her four children, ages 17, 16, 12, and 8, in nearly 2 months, and that she wasn't even sure where they were. She had fled domestic violence in Honduras, taking a flight to Mexico. She stopped at the Tapachula shelter in Mexico, where she learned that there was a caravan helping asylum seekers get to the United States. It wasn't going to cost her any money, and it was going to drop her off in Tijuana, just south of the border. They provided her and her family with food on the journey and offered to help her with the process of seeking asylum. She said she traveled by airline, train, and bus, and at some point walked, though she was often able to hitchhike. People along the way had wanted to help. When she arrived in Tijuana, she and her family were taken to churches and shelters and eventually presented themselves to the U.S. Border Patrol. They were led to a holding cell and told to wait to be processed. That was when her children were taken from her with no warning or explanation. She pleaded with the Border Patrol agents to tell her where her children had been taken. She presented their birth certificates. She needed answers desperately, but no answers were given. All she knew was that her three girls were being held together while her son was all by himself. Eventually, a social worker was able to connect her by phone to her kids, who weren't sure exactly where they were. She had come to believe that they were all in New York City, and though they said they were okay, it was hard to imagine that could be true. Another woman from Honduras had a similar story. She too had fled the country because she was being abused, and she had brought her 8-year-old son, Mauro, with her. Her son was also taken from her cell with no explanation. The deportation officers told her that he was in Los Angeles, but even they weren't sure. She had brought him with her because she thought they would be safe in the United States, but now that hope seemed lost. The Department of Homeland has said the families seeking asylum at points of entry would not be separated from one another. But when another woman at Otay Mesa Morena left El Salvador and presented herself with her two boys, ages 12 and 5, at the San Isidro Land Port of Entry Processing Center, her children were ripped away from her. She pleaded with the agents not to take her kids, but to no avail. She had to wait 15 days to call her sons because detainees were charged 85 cents per minute for calls, and she didn't have any money. She had to earn some working at the facility. Morena had worked for 7 days straight and was paid only $4. Olga had worked for 12 days and was paid just $4. They said that when they tried to report abuse, they were yelled at. They told me they'd received a lot of verbal abuse from the officers and had been forced to work late at night after long days of waiting for their hearings. 6 weeks had passed and Morena was still unable to get in touch with her children. She called the facility where she was told they'd been taken, but the phone just kept ringing with no answer. She told me that the only time they were allowed to make phone calls was when their kids were in class and unavailable. Morena said she was finding it hard to eat because she was so distraught over not seeing or speaking to her children in such a long time. Going to the comments here, Moreno and Morena, I can give her some work. You can find a good abuse is part of life. Abuse is a part of life. I mean, life is hard, right? But having your kids ripped away from you, come on now. We can't condone that. We can't condone that. And yeah, I think Spanish women age the worst, right? You meet a bad Latina, they're fine in their 20s and 30s. By the time they reach 40 though, you wake up and you're laying next to abuela. It's really bad. It's really bad. And yeah, Honduras girls have the worst diet. They have the worst diet because Central America, it's just a lot of corn and beans, a lot of corn and beans in the diet. So them women get really big. I'm just letting you know, Morena and Moreno, I don't know. Those aren't the women that you ain't trying to wife up. That's my opinion, though. My opinion. Continuing here. When I spoke with the guards at the detention center, I had a lot of questions, and the answers didn't add up. They told me, for example, that video conferencing with kids was a service they offered that was available anytime and for free. They assured me that phone calls were free too. But when I asked the mothers if they knew this, they immediately said no. They didn't even know that video conferencing was available. And when I returned to Washington and took part in a judiciary committee hearing with Matthew Albence, Executive Associate Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations at ICE. Our exchange on the topic was revealing. I told Albence how during my visit to Otay Mesa, I'd learned from the parents being detained that when they were performing labor, such as cleaning toilets or doing laundry, they were paid $1 a day. Are you familiar with that policy or practice? I asked. Many of the individuals that are in ICE custody are eligible to apply and work in a voluntary work program. Albence replied, it's not mandatory. It's voluntary if they choose to do so. Many do choose to do so just to pass the time while they're awaiting their hearing or their removal. Do you think that people voluntarily choose to clean toilets to pass their time? Is that what you're saying? I can say that we have a large number of individuals within our custody that volunteer to work in the program. To clean toilets, sir, is that what you're saying? I don't know every task that these individuals are assigned, but again, it's voluntary. Voluntary? I don't think so. Going to the comments here. Nelson Moreno says, how many times has she felt disgusted when looking at black men? I think Kamala likes black men. I think she has definitely got a love for the brothers. I do not think at all Kamala Harris is only a zaddy chaser. I disagree. Nelson Moreno says, it's sun damage. If Morena with me, she will always be in the kitchen making me nachos. I mean, you could try to keep her inside, but a lot of the Latinas get pale too. So it's like, what do you want? What do you want? You want the tan morena that's sun-kissed and got the tan lines, and she's fiery, spicy, sexy. Is that what you want? Or do you want to keep her in the kitchen and then she gets big as hell and she's blanca? I don't know. Hard work will set them free. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Like in America, according to our Constitution, slavery is abolished except if you're in prison. So technically, they don't even have to pay these people. They can make them clean the toilets for free or do other labor for free. Nelson Moreno says, I meant morena, the disgusting thing. Okay, I don't know exactly where you're going with that, but treat morena nice. Nelson Moreno says he wants her with bruises. He wants to abuse her. Don't abuse a Latin woman now. She will stab you. Once again, do not abuse any woman, but especially a Latin woman. She will stab you. Facts. Why do you think Ben Affleck left J-Lo? Why do you think Ben Affleck left J-Lo? He got the spiciest Latina. The definition of Latina. Ben Affleck was in fear of his life. That's why he always looked drunk and out and confused and possibly blinking to the cameras like, help me, help me, help me. Continuing here. So the most shocking answer I got during my time at Otay Mesa was when I asked the detention facility staff the question many people had asked me: who was responsible for leading the process to reunite these families? They looked around at one another blankly for a few seconds until one, who was apparently more senior than the others, answered, that would be me. He then admitted that he had no idea what the plan was or the status of any reunification efforts. We would later learn that federal records linking parents and children had disappeared, in some cases for unfathomable reasons. Records had actually been destroyed. When a federal court ruled that families had to be reunited within 30 days, government officials had to resort to DNA tests to try to figure out which children belonged with which family. Before I left the detention facility, I reassured the mothers that they weren't alone, that there were so many people standing with them and fighting for them, and that I would do everything in my power to help them. As I walked down the long driveway toward the exit, I saw that solidarity personified. Hundreds of people had gathered outside the fence, holding vigil in support of the families. People of all ages and backgrounds, children, students, parents, and grandparents had traveled to Otay Mesa because they shared the anguish and the heartbreak of the mothers inside. Going to the comments here. Going to the comments. Nelson Moreno says, J-Lo was doing drive-by with the oil ditty. Yeah, I mean, I would really like to know what a lot of people think about the Diddy situation. For example, Jadakiss. Jadakiss been hiding. Where's Jadakiss talking? He was like this with Diddy. You get what I'm saying? Where's Jeezy? Jeezy was like this with Diddy. Where's Ross? Ross was like this with Diddy. And I want to hear J Lo's side or J Lo's thoughts on the whole Diddy fiasco. Very interesting to know because the rumor was, the accusation was that Diddy gave J Lo the gun to put in her purse when he walked into the club, and then Shine started the shooting, right? And yeah, Cassie said that Diddy made her put the gun in her purse and walk around with it. So I would like to know what J Lo thinks about everything like this. But anyway, continuing here, I joined the throng of supporters, many of whom were carrying signs. Estamos con ustedes. Families belong together. We won't back down. Beneath the blazing summer sun, I told the press what I had seen. These mothers have given their testimony, if you will, have shared their stories, and they are personal stories of a human rights abuse being committed by the United States government. And we are so much better than this, and we have got to fight against this. This is contrary to all of the principles that we hold dear and that give us a sense of who we are when we are proud to be Americans. But we have no reason to be proud of this. These mothers had made the dangerous journey to America with their children because they knew that the danger of staying in their home country was even worse. They have the legal right to seek asylum, but when they arrive, we call them criminals. We treat them like criminals. That is not the sign of a civil society, nor is it a sign of compassion. The United States government has brought great shame to the American people. Going here to the comments. Jadakiss went to the party, but he just wanted to dance. I can't imagine Jadakiss in a freak off. Like if Jadakiss gets wrapped up too in the whole Diddy situation, all those lyrics that Jada was saying that were hella questionable. I feel like Jadakiss got the most pause-worthy bars in hip hop history. Jada moi, I kiss you, you bitch ass nigga. Bet the world won't miss you, you bitch ass nigga. Like Jadakiss got the most pause-worthy bars. Like man, I give this faggot a French kiss. Like Jadakiss literally said that bar. He said that bar on Biggie's what is it, Last Day. You won't be missed. I'll give this faggot a French kiss. What the fuck? Jada. So I would not be surprised if Jadakiss gets caught up, but I would be very surprised. But it would make a lot of those pause-worthy bars make sense. You get what I'm saying? Go in here to the comments. Nelson Moreno says 90% of those mothers think that they're better than black people. Yeah, that's the thing, right? The only time I will be against immigrants is if they come to America and they are explicitly anti-black. If that's the case, separate their kids from them, lock them up forever. Hell, just kick them out the country. I don't care. No anti-black immigrants, because the crazy thing with Hispanic people, right? They see how the white supremacists treat them. They know how the white supremacists view them. Yet and still, what do they have to say to black people? They call us cockroaches. They call us monkeys. They have all sorts of derogatory slurs for black people. Meanwhile, the white supremacists literally throw their kids in cages, kill their presidents, destabilize their nations, and yet they have all this vitriol for black people and not a word to say about the white supremacists. That makes them P-U-S-S-Y. Makes them P-U-S-S-Y, big P-U-S-S-Ys. Anyway, continuing here. The value at stake here are so much bigger than an immigration debate. Nothing makes a child feel more secure than being tucked in by a parent at the end of a day, getting a kiss and a hug, a good night story, falling asleep to the sound of their voice. Nothing is more important to a parent than talking with their child at night before the child goes to sleep, answering their questions, comforting and reassuring them in the face of any fears, making sure they know that every day everything will be okay. Parents and children everywhere relate to these rituals. They are part of the human experience. As family reunification began, we heard horrific stories that showed us just how shameful this administration's actions have been. The Los Angeles Times reported on a 3-year-old boy who was separated from his father at the border. At night, Andre sometimes wakes up screaming in the bunk bed he shares with his mother and baby brother. We saw video of 6-year-old Jefferson reunited with his father after nearly 2 months of separation. The child's body was covered in a rash. His face was bruised. His eyes were vacant. His father cried, enveloping the boy in a hug. Jefferson was stiff and expressionless. We also learned through PBS NewsHour of a 14-month-old who was returned to his parents after 85 days covered in lice, apparently having not been bathed. It is hard to imagine anything crueler than such blatant state-sponsored child abuse. A mother who was separated from her child said that she had been kept in a cell with nearly 50 other mothers. She recounted that officers told them they weren't allowed to eat because they were asking about their children. A pregnant woman fainted out of hunger. She said of the separated children that they had no shoes or blankets in the detention center and that there were people in the cells who had to sleep on their feet. The children were demeaned, she said, called animals and donkeys. These are surely just the examples we know, representative of horrors in the thousands that we may never hear of. These children ripped away from their parents will suffer lifelong trauma because of the actions of this administration. This behavior is just immoral. It is inhumane. And I've introduced a bill in the Senate to put body cameras on immigration agents so we can deter such bad behavior and create transparency and accountability. A society is judged by the way it treats its children, and history will judge us harshly for this. Most Americans know that already. Most Americans are appalled and ashamed. We are better than this, and we must make right the wrongs that this administration has committed in our name. Now, that was a very moving close to chapter 6, and we're going to go into chapter 7. But I got to say this, when Kamala became vice president, very famously, she went to those Latin American nations and told them, don't come, right? And I could understand maybe her saying like don't come, because on one hand, she knows how evil the immigration system is. Like she just said, like history will judge us poorly for this, right? But on the other hand, it's like, that many of these people are fleeing places that we have destabilized, that are rampant with violence because the US government has set up all of that to be in play. So it's sort of like, she's talking out of both sides of her neck, in my opinion, right? And also not putting into context why many of these places are destabilized, I feel like is very disingenuous. And it can lead to xenophobia and discrimination against Latin American people who are moving into America, because it makes it seem like, oh, these people are naturally criminals, naturally violent. They come from destabilized places because there is some inherent flaw in them, as if the American government did not create those conditions to exist in those countries in the first place. That's my opinion on that. Anyway, continuing here, go into chapter 7. Everybody. So, how are you adjusting? I asked. So far, so good, Maya replied, but we haven't had a winter yet. It was 2008, and Maya was visiting from New York, where she had recently taken a job as vice president of democracy, rights, and justice at the Ford Foundation. We have lived in different cities before, but for many years, our homes were never more than a short car ride away from each other. Now she was almost 3,000 miles away. I was adjusting too. We were in a restaurant waiting for our mother, who had asked us to meet her for lunch. All three of us were excited to be back in the same city, even for a brief time. We'd come a long way from the Berkeley flatlands, but we were still Shyamala and the girls. The foundation is doing amazing things, she said, and I'm going to be. Maya stopped talking mid-sentence. She was looking over my shoulder. I turned around. Our mother had just walked in. Mommy, the least vain person I knew, looked like she was ready for a photo shoot. She was dressed in bright silk, clearly wearing makeup, which she never did, her hair professionally blown out. My sister and I exchanged a glance. What's going on? I mouthed to Maya as our mother approached our table. She raised an eyebrow and shrugged. She was just as confused as I was. We hugged and greeted one another, and our mother sat down. A waiter brought us a basket of bread. We reviewed our menus and ordered our food, making lighthearted conversation. And then my mother took a deep breath and reached out to both of us across the table. I've been diagnosed with colon cancer, she said. Cancer, my mother, please, no. I know that many of you can relate to the emotions I felt in that moment, even just reflecting back on it now. It fills me with anxiety and dread. It was one of the worst days of my life. And the hard truth of life is that every one of us will go through an experience like this sooner or later, whether it is coming to terms with a loved one's mortal illness or experiencing our own. As our mother herself understood so well from a lifetime of looking at cancer cells under the microscope, no matter who we are or where you are, our bodies are essentially the same. They work the same, and they break down the same way too. No one gets a pass. At some point, nearly all of us will face a prognosis that requires profound interaction with the healthcare system. So much comes with this realization: pain, worry, depression, fear, and it is all made worse by the fact that America's healthcare system is broken. The United States depends more on healthcare than any other advanced economy, but we don't see better outcomes in exchange. Incredibly, in many parts of the country, life expectancy is actually shrinking. And when it comes to maternal mortality, the United States is one of only 13 countries where rates have gotten worse over the past 25 years. Meanwhile, working families are overwhelmed by medical bills, which are one of America's leading causes of personal bankruptcy. I wanted to be clear that I have tremendous respect for the women and men in the medical profession. For so many of them, the call to medicine stems from a deep desire to help others, from helping a baby come into the world to extending the time that person has on earth. But in our nation's approach to healthcare, we've created a bizarre dichotomy. We are simultaneously home to the most sophisticated medical institutions in the world and to structural dysfunction that deprives millions of Americans of equal access to healthcare, a basic human right. Unlike many other wealthy nations, the United States does not provide universal health care for our citizens. I repeat, unlike many other wealthy nations, the United States does not provide universal health care for our citizens. Instead, Americans need some form of private health insurance to cover the cost of their care, unless they are senior citizens, severely disabled, or lower income, making them eligible for Medicare or Medicaid. Generally speaking, private insurance is employer based, and the breadth and depth of coverage varies, as does the portion of their insurance premium that the employer is expected to pay, that the employee is expected to pay. For years, those premiums have been going up and doing so much faster than wages. A system where access to healthcare depends on how much you make has created enormous disparities. A 2016 study found a 10-year gap in life expectancy in America between the most affluent women and the poorest. That means that being poor reduces your life expectancy more than a lifetime of smoking cigarettes. The Affordable Care Act, ACA, aka Obamacare, went a long way toward making health insurance more accessible and affordable, offering tax credits to those who can't cover their premiums and expanding Medicaid to cover millions of people. But after it passed, Republican leaders made it an intense partisan issue and worked to sabotage, strip, and subvert it. Indeed, the Senate leader openly declared that it should be repealed root and branch. Their argument ranged from comparing the Affordable Care Act to colonial taxation by King George III to suggesting that the president would someday decree that the government would pay for only one baby to be born in a hospital per family. But for all their posturing and falsehoods, the GOP hasn't bothered to devise a serious alternative. They were playing politics with people's lives, and they still are. There have been more than 100 lawsuits challenging the ACA since its passage. Republican governors blocked 17 states from expanding Medicaid, leaving millions in places like Florida, Texas, Missouri, and Maine without affordable coverage. In numerous states, Republican lawmakers have passed laws restricting the ability of healthcare officials to help people enroll in insurance plans, despite a law that provides funding for that explicit purpose. Go into the comments here. Nelson Moreno says, free healthcare if they're willing to kiss the ass of at least two black men. Some of these recommendations are hilarious, but I could think if they're not going to give reparations to black people, at least give like free medical care for every black American, right? Like, because we have some of the worst health outcomes in America, and a lot of it can be traced back to systemic racism. So let's do that. That's a starting point. For anybody who doesn't like the idea of black people, descendants of slaves and freedmen, getting cash reparations, just give us free healthcare. Let us live longer than the white supremacists. Continuing here. In 2017, the first executive order from the new administration ordered federal agencies to exercise all authority and discretion available to them to waive, defer, grant exceptions from, or delay the implementation of any provision or requirement of the Affordable Care Act that would impose a fiscal burden. The administration halted ACA cost-sharing payments that would have provided more affordable health insurance for middle-class families and individuals, and even canceled an advertising campaign to alert people about the 2017 open enrollment period, going so far as to pull ads that were already fully paid for. The results of these efforts has been deep uncertainty and instability in the insurance markets, which has resulted in soaring premiums, forcing people all over the country to give up their health insurance altogether. And this was on top of the efforts of congressional Republicans to fully repeal the ACA more than 50 times. In July 2017, the push to end Obamacare was thwarted by just 3 votes, but they will surely try again. Repealing the ACA would result in tens of millions of people losing their health insurance. It would allow insurance companies to reinstate lifetime limits, driving countless Americans into bankruptcy, and permit insurance companies to once again deny coverage based on pre-existing conditions. From asthma to high blood pressure, diabetes to cancer, we all remember what that was like. We know we can't go back. In early 2011, just after I was elected Attorney General of California, I went in to see my dentist for a checkup. The dental hygienist, Crystal, and I knew each other from past visits, and it had been a while since I'd seen her. Crystal asked me how I'd been. I told her I'd been elected. I asked her how she'd been. She told me she was pregnant. It was great news. As a dental hygienist, she was working for a few different dentists, but wasn't considered a full-time employee of any of them. This was before the ACA was in place. So Crystal was on private insurance with only basic coverage, just enough to cover her annual exams. When Crystal found out she was pregnant, she went to her insurance company to apply for prenatal coverage, but she was denied. They told her she had a pre-existing condition. All right. Nelson Moreno says, kiss my ass cracker, me to whites, broke and dying cancer patients. That's the thing. Like if you're a white Republican and you're poor as hell and you're voting against the ACA, or you're voting for Republicans that will try to repeal Obamacare, yeah, I could understand why some people would say, yeah, kiss my ass, while you're on your deathbed, not being able to get coverage, right? Yeah. And even though Medicare or Medicaid might cover it, right, we should take it away from people who do not support Obamacare, right? Who do not support government interference in the medical market, right? Because basically it's the insurance companies having a very powerful lobbying arm in America, preventing Americans from having free universal health care. Anyway, continuing here. I was alarmed. You okay? What's wrong? I asked. What's their pre-existing condition? And she told me it was that she was pregnant. That was why the insurer had turned her down. When she applied to another healthcare company for insurance, again, she was denied. Why? Pre-existing condition. What was it? She was pregnant. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This young woman was forced to go into her 6th month of pregnancy before she received a sonogram. Thankfully, there was a free clinic in San Francisco where she could get her prenatal care. Thank God Crystal had a strong and beautiful baby named Jackson, and they're both doing well today. But think about that for a minute. This is the world we could return to if they abolished the ACA. Women denied health care coverage for perpetuating the species. Let's remember the words of Mark Twain. What, sir, would the people of earth be without women? They would be scarce, sir, almighty scarce. The Affordable Care Act provided a lot of relief, but there are still structural realities that make health care too costly for working families. As anyone who's been to the doctor knows, in addition to premiums, there are also deductibles and co-payments for prescription drugs and healthcare services to worry about. What could end up costing thousands of dollars out of pocket. Compared with people in other wealthy countries, Americans face extraordinarily high prescription drug prices. In 2016, for example, the same dose of Crestor, a medication that treats high cholesterol, cost 62% more in the United States than just across the border in Canada. This disparity exists with drug after drug. 58% of Americans take prescription drugs, 1 in 4 take 4 or more, and among those currently taking prescription drugs, 1 in 4 find their medications difficult to afford. Why are Americans paying so much more for the medicines we need? Because unlike many other advanced countries, the U.S. government doesn't negotiate prices on prescription drugs. When a government is purchasing medicines in bulk, it can negotiate a better price and pass those cost savings to consumers, much like the cost savings you enjoy at a wholesale grocery like Costco. But the current U.S. healthcare system doesn't allow for such deal making. That's just crazy that that's not even allowed, right? In a free market, the U.S. government should be able to buy the drugs too and make them cheaper, right? Subsidizing the price. but we don't allow that. Like, that's just an instant fix that we could have to make drugs and Medicare and medical treatment in America cheaper, but we don't even allow that. That's crazy. That just shows the greed of the insurance companies. Continuing here. Medicare, which covers about 55 million people, could have incredible bargaining powers to drive significantly lower prescription prices through negotiation. But lawmakers from both parties, at the behest of the pharmaceutical lobby, have prohibited Medicare from doing so. Individual health insurance plans are allowed to negotiate, but with their relatively small numbers of enrollees, they have little leverage to make a dent in prices. The alternative to negotiating lower prices ourselves is to import cheaper drugs from countries that do. Imagine, for example, that you need Crestor. What if you could buy it from Canada at a significant discount? One of my very first votes in Congress would have enabled just that by allowing Americans to purchase drugs from our northern neighbor. The amendment I voted for earned significant bipartisan support, but the powerful pharmaceutical lobby helped kill it in its tracks. Absolutely sad. Crazy, crazy. I hope every pharmaceutical CEO gets cancer and they can't afford treatment because their boat capsized on a deserted island. Going here. Nelson Moreno says, delete the pregnancies for free if the baby suffers from white. Now, all right, now this is just getting ridiculous. That's absolutely hilarious. No, don't abort white babies. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Y'all are crazy, man. My comment section is crazy. Continuing here. Pharmaceutical companies have wielded influence over Congress for years, and their power is intensifying. A report by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, found 153 companies and organizations lobbying in the area of drug pricing in 2017, a number that had quadrupled over the previous 5 years. In 2016, fearing that Congress might actually do something to get drug prices under control, PHRMA, the trade association that represents the largest drug makers, increased its membership dues by 50% so it could raise $100 million more with which to fight. It should come as no surprise that over the past decade, the pharmaceutical companies have spent about $2.5 billion on lobbying. Imagine the new drug trials they could have funded instead. Going to the comments here, Nelson Moreno says they hate Black people more than they hate Big Pharma. Think about that. That's actually true. That's actually true. People that vote for Republicans, people that vote for conservatives, you hate the immigrants, you hate the Muslims, you despise the idea of Black people having the same rights as you, just because of whatever misinformation you've been held, more than you hate the major corporations like Big Pharma who make actual living and getting treatment for your sicknesses harder. That's crazy to think about, right? We have to know who the enemy is. We have to shoot the sheriff, not the deputy. We shoot the sheriff, not the deputy. So these efforts have also helped prop up a system by which pharmaceutical companies can quash competition from generic brands, preventing more affordable versions of a medication from reaching the market for years. And in the meantime, they continue to raise prices without any compunction. Take pharmaceutical manufacturer Mylan. Mylan raised the price of the EpiPen, a life-saving treatment for anaphylactic shock by nearly 500% over 7 years. Between October 2013 and April 2014, the company increased the price of pravastatin, a statin that helps reduce cholesterol and prevent heart disease, by 573%. During that same period, Mylan jacked up the price of albuterol, a common treatment for asthma, from $11 to $434. You don't need to be a prosecutor to see something wrong with a 4,000% price hike. Prescription medicines are not luxury goods. Quite the opposite. We don't want to need them. No one aspires to be allergic to peanuts or to suffer from heart disease or asthma. I'll always remember the terror I felt when Mina had a childhood asthma attack so bad that Maya had to call 911. It's heartless and wrong for companies to make a fortune by exploiting the fact that their customers literally cannot live without their products. At the same time that pharmaceutical companies are dramatically raising their prices, they are also cutting down on the amount amount they spend on research and development of new drug treatments. In January 2018, for example, Pfizer announced that it would no longer participate in neuroscience research, meaning an end to its work on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, which together affect tens of millions of people around the world. Go into the comments here. Nelson Moreno says, I kept my EpiPen when I saw white men going into shock. Y'all be killing me. That's funny. That's kind of funny. That's kind of funny. Like you see like a Nazi just having like a seizure on the floor and you slowly put your EpiPen back in your jacket. You're like, I was about to help him, but then I saw the swastika tattoo. Like, that's hilarious. Nelson says, I had an asthma attack when Kamala left me for Doug. That's funny as hell. Y'all can't stop hitting me so hard, Nelson. Yeah, I'm trying to read this book, man. Oh, man. I thought you were about to say you had an asthma attack when Kamala threw it back. I mean, that would have been funny too. All right. Anyway, continuing here. At the same time that pharmaceutical companies are dramatically raising their prices, they are also cutting down on the amount they spend on research and development of new drug treatments. In January 2018, for example, Pfizer announced that it would no longer participate in neuroscience research, meaning an end to its work on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, which together affect tens of millions of people around the world. Too many of our fellow Americans are getting crushed under the weight of high drug prices, having to choose between taking the medications they need and buying other essentials like food. And that's not to mention the financial peril they face if they go to the emergency room. Over the course of 6 months, Vox investigated more than 1,400 emergency room bills and found a series of troubling anecdotes about patients blindsided by outrageous fees. In one example, parents brought their baby to the ER after he fell and hit his head. There wasn't any blood, but the parents were worried, so they had an ambulance take him to the hospital. The doctors determined that the baby was fine. He was given a bottle of formula and discharged less than 4 hours after he'd arrived. When the bill came, the parents found out that they owed the hospital nearly $19,000. Your baby falls down, you get a check, and they send you a bill for $19,000 in the United States of America. In another case, a woman broke her ankle and had an emergency surgery. Despite the fact that she had medical coverage, her insurance company decided that the hospital had charged too much money. Instead of paying in full, they passed $31,250 in fees onto her. In still another case, a patient in a motorcycle accident actually confirmed on the phone before going into surgery that the hospital he'd been taken to was in his insurance company's network, but the surgeon who operated on him wasn't. As a result, he was expected to pay $7,294. That's insane. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. Mine 43 million Americans who require mental health care at some point during the year. Even if you have insurance, it is extremely difficult to find mental health care providers who will take it. Almost half of psychiatrists don't take insurance. On the whole, mental health care providers have no incentive to sign a contract to a job to join an insurance company's network because they are reimbursed at such low rates. As a result, if you need mental health treatment, you are likely to have to go out of network. And because continuous care is incredibly expensive, people tend to forego it altogether. Depression is increasing in the United States, especially among young people. But more and more, it's only people who can pay out of pocket who can access the care they need. The problem with mental health care isn't just cost. It's also a general lack of qualified providers. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, the United States will need to add 10,000 mental health care providers by 2025 just to meet the expected demand. And when you focus on the problem on a regional level, the challenge is even greater. Alabama has only one mental health professional for every 1,260 people. Okay, so ACTI is going to get put to work. We're going to make sure ACTI gets put to work. It seems like, I thought there were too many psychiatrists and therapists in America, because it seems like, the mental health talk seems to be everywhere. So I thought there's an influx of people studying psychology and becoming psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists, but it seems like there's not. I'm actually surprised because the therapy push has been everywhere in media. So Acting's gonna make a bank. Simon's gonna retire. I'm gonna have my feet up on a beach somewhere, still yelling about white supremacy on YouTube with like only Nelson in the chat. Because goddamn, I did not know it was that bad in America. But that explains the Karen epidemic. That really explains the Karen epidemic because we got a ton of people. We got a ton of people running around in America who are just insane, insane. I saw a video on X the other day of this white woman just yelling the N word in the street barefoot. Slim, thick white woman, right? Didn't look like she would have problems like looking on the exterior. She didn't look homeless. Looked like she was going out to a night of partying, wearing that little black dress. You get what I'm saying? And then she was just started yelling and screaming at people. N-word, N-word. You get what I'm saying? I can't say the N-word on YouTube, even though I'm black, because YouTube will demonetize me. But yeah, gonna go into the comments. Nelson says 19K or let him go to a crack haven. Easy choice to me. I don't get that. I don't get it. I don't get that joke. Anyway, continuing here. So, and when you focus on the problem on a regional level, the challenge is even greater. Alabama has only one mental health professional for every 1,260 people. Texas, just one per every 1,070 people. West Virginia, one per every 950 people. A report from New American Economy found that roughly 60% of American counties lack a single psychiatrist. Wow, wow, wow. That explains a lot. That explains a lot. In rural counties, home to 27 million people, there are only 590 psychiatrists. That's one for every 45,762 people. Even in Maine, the state with the best access to mental health care, 41.4% of adults with mental illness do not receive treatment. Think about that for a minute. Imagine if in your hometown, 4 out of every 10 broken legs were unaddressed. 4 out of every 10 infections went untreated. 4 out of every 10 heart attacks were ignored. We would say that's unacceptable, and rightly so. It's just as unacceptable that mental illness goes unaddressed, untreated, and ignored. My mother's cancer treatment required a grim kind of routine. During the day, I would take her to the hospital for chemotherapy. We'd see many of the same people every time, men and women of all different ages, hooked up to a machine that was infusing their bodies with the toxic drugs they hoped would save their lives. It took on a strange familiarity, an abnormal sense of normalcy. If I had to, I'd drop her off and pick her up when chemo was done, but I preferred to wait and keep her company, and she preferred it too. Sometimes the chemo would steal her appetite. Other times she was hungry, and I would get her buttery croissants that she loved from a bakery nearby. More than once, she had to be admitted to the hospital with complications, and I remember a lot of hard days and nights under those fluorescent lights. When my mother was asleep, I would walk down the long corridors, glancing into the rooms as I passed. Sometimes people would look up, sometimes they wouldn't, and all too often, they were lying there alone. I left that experience convinced that no one should have to face a hospital stay without support, and that many do. My mother's circumstance could feel overwhelming. Chemotherapy is depleting. Oftentimes, my mother was too wiped out to do anything but sleep. Meanwhile, there were so many medications, possible side effects, counterindications, and things to keep track of. What if she had a bad reaction to a new medicine, as happened more than once? I had to coordinate her care, make sure her doctors were talking to one another, and ensure that she was getting the proper treatment. I often wondered how my mother would have fared if we hadn't been there to speak up on her behalf. I came away believing that we should mandate patient advocates with medical expertise so that anyone dealing with an acute illness has a trustworthy, capable champion by their side. After all, we have decided that when their liberty is at stake, people are entitled to an attorney. We do this because we understand that most people don't speak the language of the courtroom. And even if they do, in high pressure situations, it's difficult to make objective judgments. The same is true in a hospital. Emotions are running high. People are placed into a new environment where a specialized language is being spoken with complex, unfamiliar terms and phrases, and they may have to make decisions while they are frightened or in pain or heavily medicated, or all three. They're expected to be strong enough to monitor themselves at a moment when they feel deeply vulnerable. We should have expert advocates to shoulder that burden so that patients and their families can focus on healing. I like that idea, like a medical advocate, sort of like a court appointed attorney if you don't have one, or if you can't afford one, right? It's just how can we guarantee that somebody will do the best for this patient, right? Because I could easily see that job just being like a job that you just rubber stamp, right? Like the doctor tells you this, and you might not know what the doctor is prescribing or saying. So you could just say, well, I guess so, doctor. I don't know this person. I don't know this person from Adam. You get what I'm saying? So I, and you know, you could argue that the same thing happens in the criminal justice system with the court appointed attorneys. Like the appointed attorneys have a reputation for not caring about their clients because they're so overwhelmed with cases, right? But yeah, I like the idea. I think we just got to iron out the kinks a bit. So yeah. We should also speak truth about the racial disparities in our healthcare system. In 1985, then Secretary of Health and Human Services Margaret Heckler released a path-breaking report on the Secretary's task force on Black and minority health. As she wrote at the time, despite significant progress in the American health picture overall, there was a continuing disparity in the burden of death and illness experienced by Blacks and other minority Americans as compared with our nation's population as a whole. In her words, this disparity was an affront both to our ideals and the ongoing genius of American medicine. I was in college when she commissioned this study. What have we seen in the 3 decades since then? The gaps have narrowed, but they are pervasive, and communities of color pay the price. According to the 2015 Kelly Report on Health Disparities in America, Black Americans have higher mortality rates than any other group in 8 of the top 10 causes of death. In segregated cities like Baltimore, there are 20-year gaps in the life expectancy of those living in poor Black American neighborhoods and those living in wealthier and whiter areas. A baby born in Cheswold in Baltimore's far northwest corner can expect to live until age 87, writes Olga Kazan in The Atlantic. 9 miles away in Clifton Barra, near where The Wire was filmed, the life expectancy is 67, roughly the same as that of Rwanda, and 12 years shorter than the American average. These disparities begin in the delivery room. Black babies are twice as likely as white babies to die in infancy, a stunning disparity that is wider than in the 1850s, when slavery was still legal. In fact, infant mortality rates for Black babies today are higher than they were for white infants at the time of the Heckler Report. In other words, today, Black infants are less likely to survive their first year than white babies were in the early 1980s. Black women are at least 3 times as likely to die due to complications relating to pregnancy than white women, a shocking gulf that transcends socioeconomic status. A major 5-year study in New York City found that college-educated Black women are more likely to face severe complications in pregnancy or childbirth than white women who never made it through high school. Go into the comments here. Nelson said Diddy should sign a bottle of baby oil and donate to Black community healthcare. Yeah, free baby oil for everybody, courtesy of Diddy. Continuing here. So there are numbers of factors that put Black men, women, and children at a disadvantage. Hundreds of years of institutionalized discrimination in housing, employment, and educational opportunity have left Black Americans more likely to lack access to health care, to live in poor neighborhoods with limited healthy food options, and to have fewer community health care resources. And because Black Americans are more likely than their white counterparts to be born and raised in low-income, high-crime neighborhoods, they are more likely to experience a phenomenon known as toxic stress, the result of trauma caused by things ranging from witnessing violence to experiencing it. This causes not just psychological anguish, but also physical changes. To borrow the words of toxic stress expert Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, founder of the Center for Youth Wellness in Bayview Hunters Point, child adversity literally gets under our skin and has the potential to change our health. One study found that children who go through at least 6 adverse childhood experiences could see their life expectancy reduced by more than 20 years. Physiological stress leads to hypertension, which results in higher rates of infant and maternal mortality, among other conditions. Research has even found that certain levels of stress shorten our telomeres, which are structures that hold our chromosomes together. As we age, our telomeres naturally get shorter until cells start dying, which leads to disease. A study at the University of Michigan measured the telomere length in hundreds of women and found that Black women were biologically more than 7 years older than white women their age. But environmental circumstances alone cannot explain healthcare disparities. It's also the case that Black Americans experience poor care when they go to the doctor. White patients are 10% more likely to get screened for high cholesterol than Black Americans, even though rates of of heart disease and stroke are higher among Black Americans. Black patients are also less likely to be treated using procedures to repair blocked arteries. White women are more likely to get breast cancer screening than Black women and Latinas, and women of color are more likely to have their symptoms dismissed by their doctor, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Go into the comments here. Nelson says, I meant sign and sell and donate the money from the signed baby oil. It would be a good step forward to make up for his mistakes. Well, we got to see what happens with Diddy. I mean, he hasn't been prosecuted yet, and everybody is innocent until proven guilty, right? When tennis star Serena Williams, one of the greatest athletes of all time, delivered her baby, she had serious complications. The day after an emergency C-section, Williams started having trouble breathing. She had a history of pulmonary embolisms or blood clots, and having experienced them before, she suspected she was having another. She told Vogue magazine that she walked out of her hospital room so that her mom wouldn't worry, and told her nurse that she needed a CT scan and an IV blood thinner right away. But the nurse was skeptical. She thought Williams must have been confused because of her pain medication. Williams persisted. Rather than give her the CT scan and IV drip, the doctor arrived with an ultrasound machine. I was like a Doppler, Williams recalled. I told you I need a CT scan and a heparin drip, she stressed to the medical team. When they finally sent her for a CT, they discovered that she was right after all. I was like, listen to Dr. Williams, she told Vogue. There were further complications that required surgery and left her bedridden for 6 weeks. If someone like Serena Williams can go through such an ordeal, imagine what happens to other patients who articulate symptoms and are ignored. What accounts for these inequities in the care of our fellow citizens? A growing body of research suggests that part of the problem is unconscious, implicit bias, similar to what we see in police departments. All of us absorb social stereotypes and assumptions, often without ever realizing it, but left unexamined, they risk leading us to behave in discriminatory ways, which can have profound consequences in fields like law enforcement, criminal justice, education, and health. Going to the comments, Nelson Moreno says, Williams is paying millions for the wrong white doctors. I mean, yeah, Serena Williams is one of my favorite people in the world. She's cool, but yeah, she should find some Black doctors. You get what I'm saying? Like, she has enough money to have the best medical care in the world, and go find some great Black doctors to take care of her. I think that's important, right? But we also just need to train the white doctors in general to not be racist, and stop letting Black women die while giving birth. There's a great documentary I want to watch and review regarding that, and I posted that on Twitter, and I've been meaning to cover that for a few months. That might be something we do in the next Simon and Acne movie reviews. Continuing here. Some enlightened members of the medical profession are working to address this problem. At UC San Francisco, all first-year medical students take a class on the discriminatory effects of these biases. Before they begin, they are given an implicit bias association test that measures their unconscious attitudes, not just about race, but about gender, weight, and age. Researchers found that 75% of those who take the test, no matter their race, show an unconscious preference for white people. How do we close the divide? It starts by speaking the uncomfortable truth that it exists, and then we can break the problems into parts we can tackle one by one. First and foremost, we need every medical school in the country to require implicit bias training for their students. When people are given the knowledge that implicit bias is real and that we all have it, it gives them room to think about it in their daily actions and make better decisions. We also need medical schools to focus proactively on bringing more diversity into the field. As of 2013, only about 9% of our country's physicians are non-white, and only 4% are Black. This is the first gap we need to close. If we intend to close the others, it won't be easy. It'll be a generational challenge, but it's time we get started. Most critically, however, improving health outcomes across the board demands that we transform the healthcare system itself. I believe that healthcare should be a right, but in a system where the quality of your care does indeed depend on your station in life, the reality is that healthcare is still a privilege in this country, and we need that to change. It's why we need Medicare for all. Imagine if U.S. healthcare coverage was based not on how much you can pay, but instead on your health needs. The purpose of the system would be to maximize good healthcare outcomes rather than maximizing profits. That in itself would be revolutionary. Getting sick would no longer mean risking bankruptcy. Employers would no longer have to spend so much to provide health insurance to their employees, and the system itself would run far more efficiently. As we see when we compare the high administrative costs of private health insurance companies with the lower cost of Medicare. Going to the comments here, Fast says, dude, why we need, first of all, starting a comment with dude already lets me know like where you're mentally at, right? We're reading a book and you open up with dude. All right. Dude, why would we need diversity in high positions? We should have high achieving people up there, not diverse groups of people, quote unquote. He also then says, also, why do you want equal rights in a country that was built by white people for white people, not black? I am more than certain Fast is Albanian, which already lets me know like where his mentality is at and how smart he is. But I'll just say this. Why would we want diversity in high positions? Well, we want diversity in high positions because America, unlike a lot of other countries, is a nation that's not built on the idea of an ethnic group or a racial group being over others. We do not have a society that is monoracial, monoethnic, monolinguistic. We are a diverse society, and so different groups of people should be represented. We are a multiracial society that should work at that level, at the basis. We should have high achieving people, not diverse groups of people. Well, high achieving people generally in America, what you mean is basically white people. And for a long time in American history, only white people were allowed to be high achieving. Since the inception of America, there have been great people from my lineage, from Black Americans lineage, from Native American lineage, from Hispanic American lineage, but they were not allowed to be great because of the systemic white supremacist, anti-Black and racist policies that were enacted by the whites at top because they didn't want they didn't want there to be competition. They wanted everything to themselves, right? So there are great Black people, but what we want is to have a fair shot. And what we do notice is that when Black people and other groups of people are given a fair shot, the cream does rise to the crop. And unfortunately, a lot of the proportion of white people at the top seems to falter because for a long time, people who have been classified as white and identified as white have been able to skate by with mediocrity. So I'm answering that question there. And equal rights in a country that was built by white people, well, that's just a lie and a fallacy. America was not built by white people. There would be no America if it were not for Black Americans, period, and other groups of people as well who contributed. And it was not a country built for white people. It was a country that was built for the ideas of the Enlightenment. See, a lot of the people who identify as white don't even understand that in white history, they were trying to grasp for something greater through the ideas of the Enlightenment. The idea that there shall be no kings, there is no commandment from God dictating one person or group of people over the other, which is why they had the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and many other revolutions that were fighting against the mandate of kings to rule over. A lot of people who identify as white don't even understand where their own history comes from, which goes to show why somebody named Fast and who starts a sentence with dude is not intellectually fit enough to hang on this channel. But we'll let him live in the comment section. I'll let Nelson Moreno, attack him or anybody else want to challenge him and stuff like that. And I'll try to reply to the comments as well. But it's really disheartening that we have a lot of people out there that are this ignorant. And the founding fathers were white supremacists. Well, the founding fathers were white supremacists. I'm glad we can at least agree on that. Anyway, I'll continue here in the book. All right. But even if we could snap our fingers and make Medicare for all a reality, this alone would not alleviate all of the problems in the system. For starters, we need to dramatically increase funding to the National Institute of Health to step in and fill the innovation gap that pharmaceutical companies have left. I remember how proud my mother was to work with the NIH as a peer reviewer and collaborate with other experts in her field. She would speak of her time there with such reverence that when I was a girl, I imagined Bethesda, Maryland, where the agency is located, to be a place filled with castles and spires. I might have been wrong about the architecture, but not about the beauty of scientific collaboration, and certainly not about the fact that the NIH is a national treasure. If we want our children to have cures for humanity's most terrible diseases, we should invest in our national and medical researchers instead of relying on companies that would rather funnel more money to the shareholders. Going to the comments here, Nelson Moreno says, USA was built throughout hundreds of years, still being built. If we go by beginning, it was built for Anglo-Saxons. Well, that's generally not true too. Number one, Anglo-Saxons does not exist. It's just a white supremacist myth. There was a tribe called the Anglo-Saxons, but those people have dissipated over time. Now, Anglo-Saxons was not the people who built America were black people, from the economies to the ports to the literal Washington D.C. was designed by a black man named Benjamin Banneker, right? So all this talk about white people built America, like we have to get this fundamental thing down. Like that is historically not true. Anytime white people tried to build a society in America by themselves, they failed at it. They started cannibalizing each other, literally eating each other. There was a settlement. I forgot the name. But it's in Virginia. Roanoke, yes, Roanoke, Virginia. A bunch of white people who were colonists came to America, tried to set up their own society, literally died. And now nobody knows what happened there, but they literally just disappeared, right? Anytime they tried to do it without black people by their side, all the white supremacists of early America failed. That's a fact, okay? So Fast says, can I show you a link for an example? No, we don't want to see your stupid right-wing links. Keep your links to yourself. You post a link in here, you're going to get your ass blocked. No links posted in my comment section from stupid right-wing people who do not read books, who only here to spread misinformation and propaganda. Fast says, also, I don't want any animosity or ad hom. He doesn't even know how to spell ad hominem. Once again, the Albanians continue to show out and show how stupid a lot of them really are. I also don't want any ad hominem attacks from you. We are just having a conversation. I don't know why you're getting so mad. I have not gotten mad. I'm just very disappointed at your level of stupidity and ignorance and your lack of understanding of basic history. I suggest you go back to Albania fast and you learn your own country's history before you even try to comment on American history at all, period. White founding fathers also believed leeches cured diseases, which is facts as well. Continuing here. So we also need to protect patients and taxpayers from fraud, and that means putting bad actors under a microscope. Consider for-profit dialysis companies, which offer one of the worst examples of bad practices. Dialysis is a process by which a machine cleans the blood of patients who are in kidney failure. Kidney disease remains the 9th leading cause of death in America. But for a person in kidney failure, dialysis is a life-saving treatment and an important bridge between loss of kidney function and getting a kidney transplant, which is a cheaper alternative with a much better prognosis. Across the country, nearly 500,000 patients are on dialysis, getting 3 times a week to have their blood circulated out of their body through a multi-hour process that mimics a healthy kidney's function. Who are these patients? Disproportionately, they come from low-income communities. People living in certain zip codes are far more likely to end up with kidney failure, which is most commonly the result of diabetes and high blood pressure. Black Americans develop kidney failure at 3.5 times the rate of white Americans, and they constitute a nearly 1/3 of all U.S. patients who receive dialysis. The 2 largest dialysis companies, Davida Inc. and Fresenius Medical Care, have both found themselves in legal hot water. In 2016, Fresenius agreed to pay $250 million to settle thousands of lawsuits. According to the New York Times, Fresenius's own medical office sent an internal memo to doctors in the company's dialysis centers saying that failure to properly use one of the company's products appeared to be causing a sharp increase in sudden deaths from cardiac arrest. Yet the company chose not to warn doctors in non-Fresenius clinics who were using the product until after the memo had been leaked to the Food and Drug Administration. All right. Go in here. Nelson Moreno says Albanians are number 1 in sex trafficking in Europe. That's most likely a fact, and I'm very quick to believe that. I cannot verify that, though. So Fast says this isn't right-wing propaganda. Okay, it's very sad. It's the white supremacists reveal themselves. The white supremacists literally reveal themselves by how they type, how they write, and how they approach academia. It's very disappointing. The same people who claim that they're the master race or that white people built America literally cannot use the English language in proper ways. It's disappointing. And Fast is a very good example of what we're trying to fight against when we talk about white supremacy. Continuing here. So this right-wing propaganda, it's an Indian guy who was acting black to get accepted with bad test scores to schools, and he ended up getting accepted even though his scores were lower than the requirements. That's a very good point. And that goes to show how a lot of people who are non-Black exhibit anti-Black behavior. So fast, you're only bringing up an example, an anecdotal example of one person abusing the system, whatever that may be, to work at the disadvantage of Black people. So fast, you're only supporting my point that many groups of people around the world exhibit anti-Black behavior. An Indian person taking advantage of a program that's meant to help Black people, people who have historically been oppressed in America, just as well as Indians, because your community fast has been discriminatory to Indians who migrated to America since they had landed on American shores. That's a person exhibiting anti-Black behavior. So even bringing that up is not a good point. But let's also talk about the many, 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 many mediocre white men who have become CEOs, who have become presidents, who have become captains of industry, because they blocked out other people from competing with them, whether they be women, whether they be Black people, whether they be other racial or ethnic minorities. If you're going to bring up that one example of an Indian person with lower test scores getting in because he pretended to be Black, let's bring up every single example, multiple, more than we could ever name in one lifetime, of white men who rose to power in positions by being mediocre as hell, being less than the best, because they didn't allow other people to even compete in the first place. Is that a fair comparison? I would say it's not, because it's going to make the whites look very bad. But fast, the Albanians, the Albanians. Nelson Moreno, you're a European. You know more about Europe than I do. I just got to say, the Albanians continue to show up and show out on how stupidity can manifest in one person. Going here, Nelson Moreno says, and rich people live longer because they can afford better treatment. Life is unfair. A typo from a foreigner who doesn't speak perfect English. White supremacists are so silly. When did I claim I was a white supremacist? This is what Fast says. Number one, as a foreigner who doesn't speak English and doesn't even know about American culture or history, you definitely should keep quiet in my classroom. Secondly, you are saying white supremacist talking points. Saying white people built America is literally the foundation of the KKK. It's literally the foundation of the Proud Boys, literally the foundation of every single white supremacist group that is blatant and out there. They start with that very premise. If I say the Jews are the reason Germany lost World War I, is that not the basis of every single Nazi talking point? How is that any different? I can only assume you're a white supremacist. I assume you are, because you would only an Albanian or a white supremacist would say something stupid like that. White people built America. You gotta be an Albanian or a white supremacist or an overlapping meeting of those two identities to say something as stupid as white people built America. That just goes against history. No factual historian, no serious historian worth his weight in salt would ever say something as silly and ridiculous as that. And that makes you a suspected white supremacist fast. The Albanians, they continue to disappoint. Nelson, handle this man. Anyway, if you're white, you can have dozens of criminal charges and still be president. Albanians are like gypsies in the UK. I'll just leave it at that. I'll continue here. In 2014, DaVita agreed to pay $350 million to resolve claims of illegal kickbacks in a scheme where it allegedly sold an interest in its clinics to physicians and physician groups in exchange for their driving patients to those clinics. In 2015, the company agreed to pay $495 million to settle a whistleblower case in which it was accused of fraudulently overcharging Medicare. DaVita was sued in 2017 for keeping its clinics so understaffed and requiring such high-speed care and turnover that patients' lives were endangered. It's time to crack down on this kind of behavior. Finally, we will need to overhaul public health policy so that it does a better job of providing mental health care to all Americans. That effort will have to begin by ensuring that more mental health care professionals contract with Medicare in the first place. There's only one way to solve this problem. We need to raise Medicare reimbursement rates. As the largest single payer of healthcare services, the federal government must lead the way to ensure we pay all mental health professionals what they deserve. We also need to encourage a new generation of Americans to go into the mental health care field. Let's create a model similar to Teach for America or the Peace Corps, an apprenticeship system that has at its core a mission, the goal of getting people to serve their country through mental health training. Let's also do away with laws that strip funding from mental health care services. There's an old law known as the IMD exclusion, for example, that prohibits Medicare from paying for treatment in mental health facilities with more than 16 beds. This rule has hollowed out mental health care hospitals and left most people with severe mental health conditions to fend for themselves. Ultimately, I believe we should provide mental health care on demand. And when I say on demand, I mean that whoever you are and wherever you are, mental health treatment is available if you need it. In addition to requiring far more practitioners, meeting this goal will require investment in an expansion of telemedicine so patients can access mental health care no matter where they live. This is especially important for people in rural areas where nearly 100 hospitals have closed over the past several years. So far, studies have shown that telemedicine is generally as effective as in-person treatment, but further research and development can surely improve its value. Go into the comment section. Fast is telling Nelson, you're not European if you're non-whites. Okay. Uh, doesn't really matter how Albanians are treated. Albanians are native in Europe, so they can reside in Europe. You people are not, so you're not European. You're an invader. Okay. Nelson says, and if you're Albanian, you're not even really human. That's a fire clapback. That's a fire clapback. Fire clapback. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. That was funny as hell. Nelson really got that man. That man went off. You're not European. You're not European. And you're not human. That's just funny. That's a fire clapback. I'm sorry. Native, then Americans aren't American because they're white. That's Jesus Christ. The fire clapbacks. The fire clapbacks. Oh man. This is the thing about all the European native groups. Many of the European native groups are not native to Europe. The original people of Europe were the Black Grimaldi people and Cheddar Man, the people that were dark-skinned Europeans. The first Europeans were Black, and all scientists agree with me. They agree with me. I did a whole live stream saying that the first Europeans were Black, and all scientists said were duh. Because when you read any genetic study on the original people who inhabited Europe, they looked like me, and they probably looked like Nelson, though I have never seen Nelson. The people of Hungary, where I'm living right now, they know in their history they came from Central Asia. Many of the other people groups of Europe, they're all migrated here from Central Asia and other groups, right? Indo-European is the name of many of the language groups. Many of the language groups derive their origin from a language that was spoken in Persia and India thousands of years ago. Europeans, what we think of as Europeans, white-skinned, light-skinned, blonde hair, red-eyed, red-haired people, or whatever, are not European. Fast says he's Hungarian. He's not. He's an Albanian. He's a liar. What we'll notice is that a lot of the people who step into our spaces, they're not actually who they say they are. They're going to lie. They're going to cosplay as other groups and stuff like that just to try to cover for their own idiocy. Where I am, if he actually is Hungarian, he'll also just admit the fact that he is not even a European. Fast, if you are Hungarian, you have to admit the fact the Hungarians are not a European people by your own definition as being indigenous to Europe. They literally say in their history they came from Central Asia. They followed an eagle. This is the story how Hungarians got to Europe. They say they followed an eagle, and when that eagle dropped a sword in the ground, then that's when they said, we're going to live here, right? When in actuality, the Magyar people basically fought and conquered other people until they landed up in this place called the Carpathian Basin, whatever, and now they're just stuck here, right? Anyway, European is a skin color, dirty, poor Albanian can barely write English properly. Ain't that a shame? Ain't that a shame? Nelson, I feel sorry for you that you had to grow up around these sort of whites. Our whites are bad, but at least they admit that they're invaders, right? The Hungarians, the Albanians, basically every single white group that wants to claim now their European identity as central to them, they all came from somewhere else. They all came from somewhere else. And the original Europeans looked like us. But see, people like me, people like Nelson, we don't claim any sort of territory or ground as necessary for our identity because we realize that all people are human. We believe in the inherent goodness of mankind. We're not here as claiming superiority. Unlike people like Fast, who believe in the inherent superiority of one group of people over another, I don't believe black people are better than white people. I don't believe any group of people are better than any other group of people. We want all people on the planet to share this planet together and live amongst each other in peace and harmony. But people like Fast and white supremacists in general believe that there are some people who are better than others, deserving of life more than others, and therefore treat other people differently, which is not right. And I want to make everybody know that that is not right. We should treat all people with respect and dignity. There's no people that are better than other people. There is no group of people that are smarter than other people or more deserving of any single landmass on this planet. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, continuing here. Fast is saying, no one said European is a skin color. Fast, you literally said that. You literally said, if you're not white, you're not European. So by therefore, being white is essentially European. You literally said that. How at the, this is a product of Albanian public education. And even worse, because he's Albanian, he's now trying to put it on the Hungarians. I wish a real Hungarian would come in and say, that's not how we're taught in schools. We're not that stupid like Fast is. Fast, you literally said, we can scroll up and see, Nelson, you're not white if you're not European. Therefore, somebody who is white is European. So no one said European is a skin color. That's a lie, showing that you're a liar. But race is certainly part of it. Okay, this is what type of stupid shit is this? Fast is very slow, as Nelson said. Yes, it's apparently very obvious. He is very slow. No one said European is a skin color, but race is certainly a part of it. I would like for Fast to describe to us what is race. Is race a real thing? Is race an actual biological construct, or is it something that we've created? Because many years ago, Fast, in my country in America, they said that dirty Albanians like you were not white. So I'm trying to understand, is race a real biological construct? Because it seems to change every now and then. One minute some group is white, the other minute they're not. Let us know. Let us know. Skin color is an indicator of your race. So there is a correlation between your skin color and being European. Nice try though. So you fast. Make it make sense. You said being European is not skin color. Then you literally end your sentence by saying being European is about race, which is tied to skin color. These people literally are really slow. Like Nelson Moreno says, Fast is very slow. I just want, that is one of the funniest comments and the saddest comments I've seen in my comment section. Yeah, Fast says, of course race is real. That's why your nose is so big and mine isn't. Okay, is having a big nose is bad? Having a big nose is bad, apparently. I guess so. According to Fast, having a nose of different sizes, as if there aren't Europeans with large noses, is apparently a bad thing. Okay. All right. Fast, race is real because you have a micro penis. Tell the truth. Tell the truth, Fast. The little dick energy that you're emanating in the comment section is really, really apparent. Why is this word banned from your chat? I didn't ban any words, Fast. You literally do not know how to type in English, showing the minimal capacity your brain has for the English language. It's really bad. IQ is not banned. I did not ban the word IQ. You guys can go in there and talk about IQ all you want if that helps you compensate for your micro penis. Okay? Because of Nelson Moreno says race is real because of nose, directly quoting Fast. This is one of the funniest people in my chat. I'm gonna have a good time with him here because he's like a good sounding board to expose like white supremacist ideas and also how bad the Albanians are in general. Okay. Nelson Moreno says, I'm black, but I have a straight, narrow nose. According to Fast, I'm from a different race. Exactly. Like it literally makes no sense. Oh man, this is great. I'll continue here. In the days before being sworn in as senator, I read a newspaper profile of Chillicothe, Ohio, a small city in the southeastern Ohio Ohio's Ross County. It's located on the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains with sprawling fields of soybeans and corn and a skyline marked by the smokestacks of a paper mill that has operated continually for more than 100 years. Kenworth has its largest truck manufacturing plant in Chillicothe and pays middle-class wages. The local hospital is one of the county's largest employers, but the grand history and pride that once defined this classically American town has been replaced by a sense of despair. 77,000 people call Ross County home. In 2015 alone, doctors in the county prescribed 1.6 million opioid pills. That same year, 38 people died from accidental overdose. The following year, another 40 lost their lives. Now you can get heroin quicker in these communities than you can get pizza. Terry Minnie, head of Ross County's Heroin Partnership Project, told the Washington Post. They're delivering. According to the Post, addicts in Ross County often shoot up in public places, hoping that if they overdose, paramedics or police officers will revive them. One day in September, police and paramedics responded to 13 separate overdose calls, including one fatality, a man who died in an apartment right on Main Street. Meanwhile, a woman overdosed in her car as it idled at a Valero gas station with her 2-year-old daughter in the back seat. As has happened in other areas with heavy opioid use, the violent crime rate has gone up, as have incidents of theft. So have the numbers of opioid-addicted babies born and children requiring foster care. According to the local officials, 200 children were placed into state care in 2016, 75% of whom had parents with opioid addictions. This surge has required that the county nearly double its child services budget, which now makes up more than 10% of the total county budget. What was once one of the happiest places in Ohio is now clouded by a fog of hopelessness. I want everybody to see this. This is what's happening in high IQ white America. They got opioid babies. They're strung out on drugs. It's easier to get drugs in white America than it is to order a pizza. This is what the high IQ white Americans in middle America are doing. Anyway, continuing here. Similar stories are repeating themselves in every state in America. The human toll has rocked the nation to its core. Entire communities have been destroyed, and the opioid epidemic does not discriminate. It has hit people across every demographic and infected rural, suburban, and urban areas alike. For so many people, what began as a legitimate desire to reduce pain became an overpowering addiction. Now the pain they feel isn't from the original back injury or post-surgery healing. It's the pain that comes from quitting. It's like having the flu and laying in the street while people run over you while you're puking, the Chillicothe addict described to the Washington Post. Going to jump into the comments here. Fast says, Nelson, are you incapable of understanding averages and generalities? This is how Black people cope. And Nelson says, Fast has really low IQ, therefore he's Black. Oh, that's fire. That's fire. Averages, there's millions of Black people with narrow noses. Fast says, maybe if I spoke to you in clicks like your people do at your home you live so far away from, you would understand what I'm saying. Look up the meaning of averages at Nelson Moreno. How come you're in Hungary, by the way? Fast, that's because I'm getting an education, unlike you. Fast. This is why I'm here. I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm growing, learning the white man's technology. But hopefully I'll come out better than you because you've been educated by the whites all of your life and you came out like this. Yeah, it's really, really sad that people are really this dumb. Going here. The opioid epidemic has killed more than 350,000 Americans in the past 2 decades, but the national health crisis we face today is itself the result of a failure of public health intervention from the moment OxyContin was approved to be sold. It is a different story than the one we witnessed during the crack cocaine epidemic. Now, instead of people dealing drugs on the corner, people in suits and ties and white coats are dealing a drug while drug makers cover up the dangers. It started in 1995. When the FDA approved OxyContin and allowed its manufacturers, Purdue Pharma, to make the claim that, unlike previous opioids, Percocet and Vicodin, OxyContin was believed to reduce appeal to drug abusers because it was longer acting. Purdue Pharma seized on this claim and in 1996 began the largest marketing campaign in pharmaceutical history based on the idea that OxyContin wasn't addictive. The company's executives testified in Congress to this effect and ran a whole program to to convince doctors and patients that pain should be treated more aggressively than in the past, and that it could be done with little fear of addiction, as long as that pain pill was Oxycontin. This despite the fact that company officials had received information that pills were being crushed and snorted, and that doctors were being criminally charged with selling prescriptions to patients. According to a timeline developed by Mother Jones, by 2002, doctors in the United States were prescribing 23 times more Oxycontin than they had in 1996. By 2004, the Federation of State Medical Boards actually recommended sanctions against doctors who undertreated pain. Pill mills started to pop up all over the country where doctors would sell prescription and pills for cash. Between 2007 and 2012, three major drug distributors, McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, made $17 billion by saturating West Virginia with opioids. By 2009, the United States was consuming more than 90% of the world's hydrocodone and more than 80% of its oxycodone. By 2012, 16 years after OxyContin reached the market, healthcare providers had written 259 million prescriptions for opioids. For perspective, there were about 126 million households in America. That's insane. I'll go in here to the comments. Nelson Moreno says, average black people has big nose, therefore race is real. A slow guy named Fast. Absolutely. But the funniest thing was when he said, European has nothing to do with whites, but race is tied to skin color. Therefore, European is about race, which therefore means it's about skin color. I'll never get over that. I'm going to go to sleep laughing about that. That's just really funny. Fast says, yes, sub-Saharans usually, not all, shocking, I know, since you still don't understand averages, have black skin. Nelson Moreno, good luck not misunderstanding my concise reply. Okay. What is Fast talking about? See, I want everybody to notice how Fast is typing, and he's obsessed with race. He's obsessed with differentiating between people because he sees being an Albanian, where many of the white supremacists don't view Albanians as white. He thinks by being explicitly anti-black, they're going to let him in the white club, which is what the Irish did, which is what the Greeks did, which is what the Italians did. Whenever the Albanians or other groups of people who are considered non-white, even though they have the skin color to fit into the club, they say, you know what, I'm going to show the white supremacists how hard I can be on the Negroes. Rather than thinking that we could unify as people, we can live in this world together, rather than thinking that, all humanity deserves to be together. All humans are generally the same. Skin color has no differentiation on people's intelligence or moral capacity, right? There are really good and really bad people of different races. Instead of thinking that, he just says, you know what? I want to be a part of the winners club. That's the evil club. So let me be hateful. Let me be bigoted. Let me obsess about race and that sort of stuff, rather than noticing some of the disparities that are caused by people being differentiated by race and seeing how we can try to fix this together as one human family. His mother didn't raise him right. His father didn't raise him right. He didn't grow up in a country or a community that valued humanity. He only knows war-torn, dilapidated nations like Albania and other places that these non-whites come from that are obsessed with race, that are obsessed with being hateful to other groups of people. And it's very sad, but we have a bigger calling. We have a larger calling that we have as people who want to fight white supremacy by always challenging these people, having the patience, like dealing with a 5-year-old child and just saying, you know what? Sure. Yeah. Whiteness. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, how can we come together as humans to make a better world? Right. But to all the Albanians out there, you will never be white. The white supremacists have made this explicitly clear. In the era where they're racializing the Muslims, y'all will never be white. Okay. So y'all just got to chill. Okay. Being anti-black and thinking that making jokes about noses and clicking sounds and IQs is going to somehow make you into the white club. It's not going to help you. And Fast, we know you're not Hungarian, but even if you are Hungarian, you are really not white. Because saying that you're Hungarian when we know that you're an Albanian doesn't help you say that you're white, when the Hungarians in their own mythos and in their own history say that they did not come from Europe. They literally say that they are invaders from Central Asia. And if you say the Asians are white, then everything else you have to say falls apart. So Fast, you're really showing how slow you really are. Okay. All right. Nelson says many sub-Saharan Africans are more genetically different than a Georgian and a Japanese. Many African Americans are closer European genetically than West Africans. All right. Fast, fast. It doesn't matter if I speak Hungarian, because even if I speak Hungarian or don't, it doesn't change the fact that you are really, really one of the stupidest people that we've ever seen in this comment section. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Jump in here to the comment section. No, back to the text. Let's finish up this chapter. How many pages we got left in chapter 7? Quite a few, but I think I can get it done. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. Let's just knock it out. I'm going to blow through it. So, where were we? All right, yeah. All right. Nelson Moreno says, Fast was abused as a child. How many times has he considered self-deletion, do you think? I don't consider that stuff. I'm not a leftist. And you're also not white, Fast. If you're Hungarian, you're not white because the Hungarians did not come from Europe. Fast, you're not white. Not white. And Fast, if you see me in Hungary, it's not hard to find me. Not hard to find me. In this very Asian country where they speak a Central Asian language, it's not hard to find me outside. And see, this is what the white supremacists have to do. They have to threaten violence against people because their ideas hold no weight or merit. They didn't hold any weight or merit, and I didn't even say anything that was disrespectful to the Hungarian people, unless you say that being white, being called non-white, which is factually true, as disrespectful. But you can come catch these hands. You can catch these hands fast, and I'll show you how fast these hands really are. But most likely you live in Tirana in a horrible communist brutalist block apartment building, and you're typing away angry because you see a handsome black man living his great life with a big booty white wife, and you couldn't see me, as our great prophet Tupac Shakur said. You cannot see me, Fast. You cannot see me. Anyway. By the late 1990s, heroin use in the United States had declined quite dramatically from its 1960s and 70s peak, but as opioid addiction skyrocketed in the early 2000s, heroin traffickers found a highly motivated consumer base for their product, which was significantly cheaper and easier to obtain than prescription medication. According to the National Institutes of Health, roughly 80% of Americans who become addicted to heroin start with a prescription for opioids. The danger worsened in 2013 as fentanyl, an exceptionally deadly synthetic opioid with 50 times the strength of heroin, made its way from China into the American heroin supply. The CDC estimates that there were 72,000 drug overdose deaths in America in 2017 alone. That's nearly twice what it was 10 years earlier. And in 2018, the CDC released a report finding that opioid deaths are still rising in nearly every segment of the country. When I was Attorney General, I made the fight against opioids one of my highest priorities. We took down a large-scale transnational drug trafficking organization in 2011 while sponsoring legislation to make it more difficult to print fraudulent prescription pads. We went after pill mills and shut down so-called recovery centers that were overprescribing, leading to patient deaths. When funding to my department's drug monitoring program was cut, we fought tooth and nail until I got the budget restored. The system allowed prescribers and pharmacists to quickly access a patient's prescription history and make sure the patient wasn't seeking the same painkillers from different doctors simultaneously. We went after criminals who were selling opioids on Craigslist, and I filed a lawsuit against a pharmaceutical company for inflating prices for opioid addiction treatment. How has the federal government responded? Not in the way one would hope. According to a joint investigation by 60 Minutes and the Washington Post in 2017, Congress effectively stripped the DEA of its most potent weapon against large drug companies suspected of spilling prescription narcotics onto the nation's streets. The law was the crowning achievement of a multifaceted campaign by the drug industry to weaken aggressive DEA enforcement efforts against drug distribution companies that were supplying corrupt doctors and pharmacists who peddled narcotics on the black market. Go in here. Nelson says, color doesn't make race. Sub-Saharans are same race because they're black. I wonder if Fast got shot in the head or if he was born this way. I'm pretty sure he was born this way. Pretty sure. Fast says, I can't see you in the dark. You're right. See, once again, Fast, being anti-black will not make the white supremacists like you. I know the big boys at the white supremacist table at lunchtime, bully you and pick on you, and they call you the N word because you come from Albania, or even worse, you come from Hungary. But fast, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. And it's okay. It's okay. You're in a safe place now. You're amongst black folks. We're the most forgiving, loving people on the planet. Fast, fast, chill, and relax. The white supremacists, they're not around. Nobody here is going to bully you because you're not white. It's okay, fast, okay? Just relax. Nelson says, fast can barely see in the light, right? Fast says to Nelson, shot and misquoting someone and misunderstanding them on purpose does not make you correct, but your low IQ will never realize that I'm sure. That I'm sure. Once again, his English is broken and it's hard to even understand what he's saying. But I'm pretty sure even if he was speaking in his own language, Albanian, we wouldn't understand it either because it's really bad. You're low IQ. A guy with really low IQ, says Nelson. What school do you go to? Also, why do you still go to university at 35, black man? You're probably not in LTA. Okay, well, you could think that. But anyway, at any age, going to study is not wrong. Fast, you probably didn't go to school at all, which is probably why you're up in my live stream as I'm reading this book in between studying and going to classes. And I'm not 35, and I don't even don't put that on me. Don't put that on me. I just turned 34, not 35. Don't put that on me. Fast father used to give him ass massages. Very, very likely. He probably got abused and was, molested by his father, who also was a white supremacist, because many people who think like this get it from their fathers, right? And unfortunately, amongst the white supremacists, sexual deviancy, especially towards children, is very common, as we've seen multiple times. Continuing here. Nelson Moreno, Nelson Moreno, Fast says, your means your and your LMAO, it's abbreviation of both, but of course you wouldn't know that. Okay, for the person with broken English who admitted he had broken English earlier, you cannot be giving, grammar Nazi lessons. You can be an actual Nazi, which is what you are, Fast, but you cannot be a grammar Nazi here. That is not allowed. You can't do that. You can't correct anybody's English. Your English has been the absolute worst while you've been in here. Nelson Moreno says, yeah, I'm quoting you, Fast. That's why I write poor English when I use the abbreviations. And then Nelson Moreno called him a dummy. Fast says, you just misread what I said, then said my English is broken. LMAO, I love black people. Fast, your English is very broken. And not only is your English broken, your logic is broken as well. You never really backtracked and explained how the Hungarians are white, when in your own history, you came from Central Asia. But the fact is, you can't explain that because you're a dark-skinned Albanian man. Who is very insecure about his standing amongst the white supremacists because they do not view you as white. Going here, Fast says, Nelson says, never realized that I'm sure. Beautiful and intelligent European. Never realized that I'm sure. That's hilarious. Fast, if you want some English lessons, I can teach you, buddy. Don't worry. Fast says, Nelson Moreno, you're quoting me. I never said shoot. You did, and you said it in the wrong form. It's actually shot if it's in the past of a regular verb. Okay. I feel like this is a person who just secretly wants me to give them English classes, but because he's a broke, poor European who doesn't have 2 euros to rub together, or sorry, he's Hungarian, so he doesn't have 2 forint to rub together, or because he's Albanian, he doesn't have 2, what's it called, lek. He doesn't have 2 lek to rub together. He can't actually pay me for the English classes, so he's coming here for my free readings of books that I do for the world because he doesn't, have the money to pay for my English classes. All right. Sorry, Fast. I was thinking of a video shoot with your mother. Okay, that's hilarious. Fast says, even though they are literally Aryans, Albanians are Aryans, laughing my ass off. Like, that's hilarious. Like, the funniest, just the fact that Fast is claiming 2 of the most non-white Europeans he could ever claim. Like, that's the funniest part about just Fast being here. The funny part about Fast being here is he's claiming Hungarians as if the Hungarians are white, which they're not by their own history. And then the fact that we know he's Albanian and he's continuing to drag the Hungarians down with his BS shows you how white supremacy works. Like it's just hilarious. Like this is absolutely great. This is hilarious. Anyway, I'm continuing here. I can't deal with this. I can't. I'm trying to read a book. I'm trying to read the book. Anyway, in 2017, the administration declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency, but the fund they used to deal with it had only, I kid you not, $57,000 in it. That represents less than $1 for each person who died of a drug overdose that year. It's unconscionable. And if Republicans had succeeded in repealing the Affordable Care Act, they would have taken addiction treatment coverage away from 3 million Americans. This is a crisis that deserves a major federal mobilization. We need to declare a national state of emergency, which will provide more funding right away to help combat this disease, giving places like Chillicothe, Ohio, more resources to pay for addiction treatment, hospital services, skills training, and more. We need to address the challenge at every point along the spectrum, beginning with providing supportive treatment programs for those whom experts call pre-contemplators, that is, people who are not yet ready to commit to treatment. We need to make sure that people who are addicted have access to medication-assisted treatment, drugs like buprenorphine. I can't pronounce that, which prevents withdrawal symptoms and cravings without producing the kind of high that heroin or Oxycontin does. Many insurance companies will cover the cost of opioids while charging more than $200 for buprenorphine. That has to change. To go to rehab, arrive only to find that for all the expense, they are not getting proper care and treatment doesn't work. We also need to reinstate the DEA's authority to go after the major pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors to their role in creating and sustaining the crisis. And we need to invest resources in law enforcement efforts to cut off the supply of fentanyl from China. Firstly, we need to understand that at its core, this is a public health issue, not a criminal justice issue. We can't keep repeating the mistakes of the failed war on drugs that put so many people addicted to crack in prison. It is normal human behavior to want to stop feeling pain, whether physical or emotional, and people will find ways to do so. Sometimes that will mean getting help, and sometimes it will mean getting hooked on heroin. Our job is not to punish our friends and family members and neighbors by throwing them in prison. It is to put them on a sustainable path to better manage their pain. All right. Jumping here to this comment. Fast is saying, I'm not saying Albanians are Aryans. I was saying Finnish people are also from Asia, yet they are considered Aryans. By who? By who? Do you also think Finnish people are not white? Yes, by their own history, they're not white. Because you said European is being white. Fast, we're only using your logic to understand whiteness. This nebulous concept that's never solid. It's always fluid and changing, right? Y'all only want more white people whenever the numbers of white people actually decline, right? Because your birth rates are struggling and nobody wants to sleep with white women, even white men, right? So the birth rates are going down. And so y'all just continue opening the doors to whiteness. How could the Finnish people or the Hungarians be white if all they are is immigrants from Central Asia? Fast says, I think my message is not showing up. I wasn't saying Albanians are white. I was talking about Finnish people. Oh, God, this is really sad. This is really sad. We're watching him spiraling. We're watching him spiral down. Nelson Moreno says, Fast mother, the number one sex slave in the premium Albanian market. Fast mother can't understand English, so I'll call her with clicks. Ain't that funny? That's hilarious. That I'm about to cry laughing. I am about to cry laughing. You are roasting the shit out of Fast. This man is getting roasted into oblivion. I am actually scared for him. He might be on suicide watch. Finnish people come from Asia, but they have mostly European DNA. Same thing with Hungarians. So is whiteness something that is constant? Once a person is white, if they mix with people that are non-whites, can they ever not be white, right? And by their own definition, if they come from some other place, does that make them not European? Your whole system of belief is falling apart fast. When we analyze it and put it under the light, it makes no sense. You said earlier, European is about race. And race is tied to skin color. And I would also assume that race is tied to origin as well. Just like the same way you said Nelson cannot be a true European because he is not white. Those were your words, not ours, right? Even though the original people of Europe, by the scientists' words, white scientists who are from Europe would say that the original Europeans look like me and Nelson. But your people, Hungarians, Albanians, and since you want to bring the Finnish people into it, since you want to drag all the Europeans down your stupid wormhole, those people cannot be considered white because they do not come from the landmass that they say that you come from. And they cannot be Aryan as well, because Aryan specifically relates to people from where? Iran. This whole idea about Aryanness was just created by the National Socialists, the Nazis party, because they wanted to cling to some BS racial idea that was created by some pseudoscientists. There are no such thing as Aryans other than the Iranian people. Now, would you call the Iranian people white? Aye, aye, aye. Aryans, let's just make this clear. Aryans equals Iranians. Okay. Some Iranians are white, but if not all of them are white, then what are they? Because they are the literal definitions of Iranians. Fast is really bad. See, this is the problem with Albanians. They're liars. They cannot, they're so ashamed of their country and their origin that they have to bring other people and other identities into the mix. It's really bad. So they are Arabs, and Arabs means mixed. Arabs does not mean mixed. That's really dumb. So if some of the Albanians, no, if some of the Iranians are white, but others are not, then also could it be true that there are some Europeans who are white and others who are not? Because you said that earlier. You cannot be European if you are not white. We're following your logic fast, and it's falling apart quickly. Some Iranians are white and others are not. So therefore, then there could be some Europeans who are white, and therefore they're not white. There could be Europeans who are white and others who are not. But according to you, that cannot exist. But Aryans, a distinction that specifically means race, there are white Iranians who are Aryans, and then there are white Iranians, there are Aryans who are not white. Fast, I'm only you can't get what your own bullshit. I'm not stuttering. I'm repeating what you're saying. Fast, you said Europeans are white because you said whiteness is tied to race. And therefore, Nelson cannot be a European because he is not white like you. But there are Iranians who are Aryans. They are the literal definition of Aryans. But some of the Aryans are white and are not. Fast, you're saying I sound like this, but I'm literally repeating your BS. And I hope that shows you I'm walking through your logic. I'm literally repeating what you're saying to me, and you say you can't follow it. That goes to show that your logic makes no sense. When somebody repeats back to you what you said and you can't even follow it, that shows you there's a problem in your argument. Fast, I literally just said what you said. You're saying for me to spit it out. I'm not stuttering. I'm literally saying what you said. But I'm making no sense because I'm repeating what you said. And that's just ending it right there. This is really bad. I literally repeated what this man said, and now he's saying I make no sense. That's funny. He's saying I'm stuttering. I'm not stuttering. I was literally repeating what he said. Europeans are based on race. Race is based on whiteness, meaning you're white. If you have light skin, you're a part of the white race. And Europeans only have white people. You can only be a European if you're white. That's what Fast said. But then he also said that Aryans, some Aryans are white, and then there are some Aryans that are not white in the place where Aryans come from, which is Iran. So therefore, there can also be Europeans that are white, and then there are also Europeans that are not white. But according to Fast logic, that doesn't make sense. Now, just following that, he's saying he doesn't understand it. And because he doesn't understand it, and that's literally what he said, I think that goes to show that the whole idea about racial, classifications and all this sort of stuff is silly. Because when you say it back to them, it falls apart even in their own mind. I love this channel. This is dope. Nelson says, haha, you were stuttering. European Titan whose ancestors were Vikings and Roma. Ooh, spitting. Anyway, let's wrap up this. So as my mother's condition worsened, she needed more care than we could provide her. We wanted to hire a home healthcare aide to help her and me, but my mother didn't want help. I'm fine. I don't need anybody, she would say, even though she could barely get out of bed. There was a fight to be had about it, but I didn't want to have it. Cancer, the disease she devoted her life to defeating, was now wreaking its havoc on her. Her body was giving out. The medication was making it difficult for her to function, to be herself. I didn't want to be the one who took her dignity away. So we muddled through. I cooked elaborate meals for her, filling the house with the smells of childhood, which reminded us of both of happier times. When I wasn't at the office, I was most often with her, telling stories, holding hands, helping her through the misery of chemotherapy. I bought her hats after she lost her hair and soft clothes to make her as comfortable as I could. There isn't a smooth, steady decline I would learn. There isn't a smooth, steady decline I would learn. The process isn't gradual. My mother would reach a plateau and stay there for weeks, for months, then seemingly overnight fall to the plateau beneath it. During one especially hard spell, I convinced her to spend 2 weeks at the Jewish home for the aged, a place known for some of the kindest and best care, where she could get the round-the-clock care she needed. We packed her up and drove over to the home. The staff was incredibly kind to our family. They gave my mother a tour of the facility, showed her to her room, introduced her to the doctors and nurses, and explained the routine of her care. At one point, one of the doctors pulled me aside. "How's my DA?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on my mother's well-being, I hadn't made room for anything else. But the question cracked through the strength I had mustered, and I hadn't wanted to betray. I started to choke up. I was scared. I was sad. Most of all, I wasn't ready. She asked me if I had heard of anticipatory grief. I hadn't, but the term made perfect sense. So much of me was in denial. I couldn't bring myself to believe that I was going to have to say goodbye. But underneath it, I was aware, and I had started grieving my mother's loss already. There was something validating about that, about understanding what was happening to me. Putting a label on things can help you cope with them, I've learned. It doesn't make you stop feeling your emotion, but you can put it somewhere if you can name it. And now I could. When the tour was over, I unzipped my mother's suitcase so that I could help her move in. But she had other plans. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, all 5 feet of her, when she said firmly, "Okay, this was nice. Let's leave. Mommy, you're going to stay here for 2 weeks, remember?" "No, I'm not. I'm not staying for 2 weeks." She turned to the medical team who were still in the room. "This has been great. Thank you. We're leaving." And so we did. She ended up in the hospital not long after that. That was when I started to see another change. For as long as I could remember, my mother loved to watch the news and read the newspaper. When Maya and I were kids, she'd insist we sit down in front of Walter Cronkite each night before dinner. She loved to digest everything that was happening in the world. But suddenly she had no interest. Her mighty brain had decided it had had enough, though she still had room for us. I remember that I had just gotten into the attorney general's race, and she asked me how it was going. "Mommy, these guys are saying they're going to kick my ass." My mother had been lying on her side. She rolled over, looked at me, and just unveiled the biggest smile. She knew she had raised. She knew who she had raised. She knew her fighting spirit was alive and well inside me. When it was time for hospice care, we took her home, and finally, she let a hospice nurse come with us. Maya and I still didn't believe that she could die, to the point that when she said she wanted to go to India, we booked plane tickets and started planning. We worked out how we could get her on a plane and made arrangements for a nurse to come with us. We were all in a great state of delusion, especially me. I couldn't bear to tell my mother no, not because she couldn't take it, but because I couldn't. Whether it was a question of bringing a nurse home or staying in the nursing home or going to India, I didn't want to accept what saying no to her meant. I didn't want to accept that she was running out of time. Very sad here. So, yeah, going here. Nelson Moreno says, all right, so let's go to fast. White means European DNA, even if your skin color is darker, like Greeks. Okay, so fast is now retracting messages because his points are not making sense. I'm reading his comments, but he's deleting them now. So I don't know who's deleting them or if that's Nelson deleting them. I was about to read them, but either way, I just read the point about European DNA. Fast said all this racist stuff, and now he has to backtrack because it's so embarrassing for him to be caught saying this stuff. I didn't say any of that, and I didn't delete your messages, Fast. Most likely you deleted them because they're really, really stupid. So yeah, he's finally revealed himself as an Albanian after cosplaying as several other European groups, because that's what the tethers do. That's what the Albanians do. That's what people who come from failed countries do. Many of the Albanians are ashamed of their own nation because it's a failed nation. It's a poor, dilapidated, dirty nation full of people that don't even want to be there. There are more Albanians outside of Albania than actually in the country because they've had a history of failure, of not being able to keep it together, and because of all of the failure that they've had in their nation, they want to project it onto other people. We as Black Americans, we've held our communities together, held our families together, held our neighborhoods together. And throughout all of the oppression that the white supremacists have put on us, the world looks at us as the moral light. There are no Albanian Martin Luther Kings. There's no Albanian Malcolm X. There's no Albanian, Ida B. Wells. There's no Albanian Oprah. There's no Albanian Jay-Z. There's no Albanian Beyonce. So he has to project his insecurity and the failure of his people onto Black Americans like me. And also to Nelson Moreno, people who come from immigrant backgrounds or who do not look like and act like or think like the typical Europeans. He has to project his insecurity onto those people, right? But fast into all the people like them out there. There's no such thing as European DNA because by your very logic, Fast, you said that Iranians are Aryans, but there are Aryans in Iran who have never set foot in Europe. So how could that be that there are white people in a land where there have never been Europeans by your own logic, if that makes sense? Fast, you're welcome to come to Hungary. But for you would have to actually sit through at least 10 of my live streams, read the books before I ever give you where I am. Right? I'm in Hungary, minding my own business, and stupidity is contagious. And I feel like if I hang out with you, I'm going to be even dumber than before. So you're welcome to come to Hungary, but it's not hard to find me. Just hang around Budapest. I'm always running around outside, but you definitely got to read a book, man. You definitely got to read a book. You have to stop bringing other Europeans down to the level of your nation. Your country has failed in so many ways that people don't even want to be associated with it. Even the people that come from there, they have to run and flee to France. They have to run and flee to the UK. They have to run and flee to Germany because Albanians don't even want to be in Albania. And I see why, because of people like you, Fast, because we're interacting with you and you had a chance to show up well and represent your nation and show that you're open-minded, that you're willing to learn while we read a literal book in front of you. And all you had to say during this entire educational live stream was about the white race this and European DNA and IQ and stuff like that. When Fast, I've read more books on the internet than you've probably read in the past 5 years. Just in this past year, Fast, I've written more than you've probably have in your entire lifetime. I've spent more time in a classroom, Fast, than you probably have in your entire adult life. So Fast, you want to talk about IQs, you want to talk about race, European DNA, the whites on top, Aryans this, Aryan that, and literally, you couldn't even name one piece of European culture that you really value. Your favorite movement from Bach. Tell us, Fast, what is your favorite Chopin piece? What is the greatest piece from Mozart? Tell us a piece from Tchaikovsky that you really adore. This is the thing. The people who claim white supremacy and whites are better and all this sort of stuff don't even know anything about their own culture. Tell us one play from Shakespeare, one sonnet from Shakespeare that you really value. What was Othello about, Fast? You can't tell us this. You can't tell us this. You're obsessed with your skin color as if that makes you better, and you are disavowing all the culture that actually does come from Europe, because there is a lot of culture that comes from Europe. That's actually really great and interesting, but you're not here talking about that, okay? And you're really an embarrassment to your people, to Albania as a whole, and it's very sad. It's very sad. We are very disappointed in you, and yeah, anyway, going to here. So Nelson Moreno says, Fast struggles with suicidal thoughts because of child abuse. That's probably very likely. People that are this adamant about race, when they're talking about, Aryans and DNA and IQ, they probably really have a lot of insecurities. I can see that in the way that Fast types. Fast's mother had the lowest IQ in the sex slave market in Albania. That's probably why she was in the market to begin with. All right. His favorite European cultural point is that they conquered 85% of the world. I don't know if so. That's revealing a lot, fast, that you believe that raping and pillaging and colonizing and stealing from people are actual good cultural points. But if we were to ask Fast, who are the people that steal, rape, and murder the most? He's going to point to immigrants, right? Probably immigrants, and immigrants that look different than him because they have different skin colors. When he's literally saying right here that he's proud that his people, who he identifies as his people, but those people don't identify with him because he's not white. He's proud that those people, white people, by his own definition, European people, raped and pillaged and murdered and stole from the world. He's proud about that. That says a lot. Nelson Moreno says, name one neoclassical artist, and then he does a laughing emoji because Albanians conquer the world according to Fast. That's hilarious. Yeah. Anyway, Fast is just really disappointing. This is really sad. Really sad. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up this book. One night, Maya, Tony, Mina, and I were all in my mother's house when Aunt Mary and Aunt Lenore, who had phoned into town, came for a visit. I decided to cook again. I'll never forget that night. I was making Alice Waters' recipe for beef stew. I had browned the cubes of beef, and they were cooking down in red wine. And all of a sudden, my brain figured out what was happening around me. I started to hyperventilate, short breaths in and out. I felt like I might faint. All of a sudden, the delusion was gone. I had to face reality. I was going to lose my mother, and there was nothing I could do. We had called our uncle in India to let him know that she was too sick to make it. He got on a plane from Delhi to see her. I now realize that she waited for his arrival, waited to say goodbye. She passed away the very next morning. One of the last questions she asked the hospice nurse, the last concern on her mind was, are my daughters going to be okay? She was focused on being our mother until the very end. And though I miss her every day, I carry her with me wherever I go. I think of her all the time. Sometimes I look up and talk to her. I love her so much, and there is no title or honor on earth I'll treasure more than to say I am Shyamala Gopalan Harris's daughter. That is the truth I hold dearest of all. All right, so in our next live stream, we're going to pick up in chapter 8, and that will be what we'll do probably, I hope so, for tomorrow's live stream. It's late as hell here. It's about 3 a.m. I did not expect to be on this long, but the comment section was just going crazy. So I had to take care of that and handle business. But shout out to Nelson Moreno. Shout out to Fast. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream for doing this. So, yeah. Any other comments? I'm just gonna wrap this up here. Nelson Moreno says, come back tomorrow, Fast. Yeah, Fast, you're always welcome. Hopefully you get an education. Hopefully you can improve your English. And shout out to Nelson Moreno for always holding it down and representing up in the comments section. And yeah, anyway, that's all I got to say. Y'all be easy out there. Stop being anti-Black racist. Don't be a white supremacist. Race is not real, guys. It's not real. It's not a real concept. So, yeah, I'll wrap this up here. Y'all be easy. Peace.